Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, boy. Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, you're all doing well this Sunday, this end of the week, this final day. Which I guess coincides with, today the main aim, or, no, yeah. Today the main aim, or what we want to achieve, is finally finishing the Amphorius talk and going over 3.7, right? So that is, the big aim for today, chat. Um, don't believe I'm gonna do too much today, chat, because technically, uh, I need to finish more or less in around three, three-ish, 3-ish hours and a half, max 4, but most likely around 3-ish hours and a half. Because I mistimed my stuff today, and yeah, technically would have been fine. Like I fucked up some scheduling, so yeah, which is a bit annoying. Because technically, I probably could have like gotten like come on a bit earlier, right? And then it would have been, let's say, less of a pain, but it's fine. It's fine. We should have enough time to cover the whole of 3.6. Oh, hey, Naturalize. Yeah, we should have more than enough time. Since, I'm sorry, 3.7. Since when I was like thinking over it again, and also this morning, Gigok was going over, well, he was playing 3.7, right? So it's acting like a refresher for me, even though technically it's only been like a week since we finished it. And in my mind, technically, 3.7 is in a way short in comparison. I think talking about 3.7 is shorter in comparison to, let's say, like 3.6 or anything beforehand. So we should be good. We should be good. Why didn't we meet Evernight in our first cycles? Because Evernight was hiding. That's why. Evernight was hiding. That's why we didn't meet her in the first cycle. And it wasn't until the last cycle when, Evernight started to take an active role. What was she waiting for? I guess you could say that she was waiting for a rival, right? Since we still hadn't, by the time Evernight showed up, we still hadn't been, fully entered in Furious. And she was hiding from Lygos, right? Because Lygos was after March. Well, Lygos was after the uh, Remembrance Path Strider, who was technically March, right? So she was hiding from Lygos at the start of technically the start of 3.0, when we entered Amphorius in the first cycle. That's why we didn't really encounter her until afterwards. After the Aaron, after the last reset and us going into the final cycle. But we were there all the time. No, because freaking March and Evernight came into Emporis just a bit before us, right? Which resulted in the 97 days. Okay, so let me see. Let me see quickly. Let me see very quickly. I don't think there was like anything announced today, right? Or since yesterday, which is good. Which is actually pretty good because that means I don't have to go over much. Because I don't think even with ZZZ, they didn't drip market the second character, right? It's still only Zhao. So I'm assuming they're probably not gonna drip market Yeshangguang until let's see, probably until after when the new patch drops. That's probably what they're gonna do. Zhao might be free. I mean, I guess if it follows the same pattern as, let's say, 1.4 with Miyabi and Haramasa, maybe I can see that, right? So I guess it's not impossible. But she could help us with our first cycle. No, because technically, even though, let's say, Marge could go, I guess, had somewhat of an insight into the Tomb of the Forgotten Titan, March still, well, Avenite didn't have, let's say, a good enough grasp of the actual machinations of Amphorius, right? So even though I guess you could argue that she could, it wouldn't be the wisest thing, right? Because she was still lacking, let's say, information. That's why. But yeah, but it looks like there was nothing that was really announced. With the Chisa Resonator video, we'll most likely watch that tomorrow. Yeah, we'll most likely watch that tomorrow. What? Wait, hold up. This is not real, is it? Hey, wait, hold up, chat. Is this real? Oh my god, is this real? Fucking Koreans. Well, the Celestar had like a character review. Well, not a character review, but it had like a animated thing, right? Recently, right? An ultimate animation. And apparently, the Celestar Korea published this to basically apologize for apparently an ultimate having, you know, the pinching emote or looking, you know, the small pinching thing, or the, yeah, you know, the hand emote with like, which looks like pinching. Apparently, one of the ultimates looked like that, so they're formally apologizing for that. Yeah, we have reviewed opinions regarding the specific motions of the upcoming character that is currently raising issues. We sincerely apologize for any discomfort. However, we would like to inform you that this motion, contrary to your concerns, is created by an artist of foreign nationality and has no relation to any specific ideology. This is so. Oh, this is so pathetic. Hold up, is this like a. Oh my lord. This is always gonna be a thing, right? As long as it's. I wouldn't say like a South Korean fan base, right? But I guess it will always be, right? Since it's very popular. Gacha games are very popular in most of the Asian regions. Whatever. Whatever. It's like it's so stupid, but we've gone over this before. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think there was like really anything else. Let's say worth mentioning it. Worth mentioning it since yesterday. Okay. So chats. I guess let's start talking about 3.8. Sorry, 3.8 hasn't even freaking come. 3.7. Hold up, am I cut? I shouldn't be, right? Hold up. Let's just do here and then we're good. Okay. Yeah, let's just start talking about 3.8. I don't like, let's say, accelerating things. But I guess 3.8. Sorry, oh my god, it's not 3.8. 3.7. Jesus, how many times am I gonna freaking mistake that? But 3.7 starts immediately after. Well, as per usual, right? It starts immediately after 3.6, so the previous patch. Because, you know, we are literally just doing a wholly continuous story. And, you know, we now have Big Cyrene. We no longer have Small Cyrene anymore. Small Cyrene is gone. She's no longer here. She has become Big Cyrene. Big Cyrene now. No one wants Small Cyrene anymore, chats. And yeah, so essentially, we have completed the Era Nova chats. So, I mean, you could argue that we're going to go to one more cycle, right? Since we completed the Era Nova. However, according to let's say, however, according to let's say the all of our work previously, we should be able to be prepared to deal with Iron Tomb and everything. What happened in the last Iron Nova? That's was when we dealt with Avernite, right, and the Danhang becoming the demigod of Earth. That was the last cycle, or the cycle before, right? But now we are good. Wait, what does that choose? Yeah, and so since we have all the core flames now, we can properly start it, right? Since everything's been rewritten. And so before the new era starts, or the new world starts, we, are back in Ades Elysiae, right? Kind of like the stopgap just between, right? Just before. And here we can, talk with Cyrene about, the we can talk about Cyrene about what's gonna happen next. And also we can talk with Dan Hang and uh March, right? Because we ended up becoming the Titans of Creation, which are Kafle, Geoclus, and Oryx, right? Because those are the Titans of Creations, which we have, which we the trio has the power of, right? So they're in charge of creating the new world, right? And so we know that we've kept basically the memories of the previous cycle. So we're gonna start the cycle with the memories of the previous cycle. So it's kind of basically gonna, in a way, arguably you can say like it's gonna repeat the last cycle, but with a new future, right? What do you mean how? And I guess basically we also like, since in these new worlds, well, originally, you know how there was a Calamity Titans and everyone feared them. We basically make some changes so that they're no longer looked as emblems of fear, right? So basically, we kind of like improve on the worlds. Which core flame do we have ourselves? We have, well, Trailblazer has Deliverance, which is Kafle. Or March has Oryx, which is Time, and Danhang has Geoclus, which is Earth, right? And these three in the myth of, in the creation story of Amphorius are the creation titans. They were the ones who are in charge in creating uh, Amphorius. How did we get the world bearing? Avernite had it. Avernite always had it because she got it from the River of Time where Cyrene left it in the last cycle. So she always had it. She always had both Oryx and world bearing with her. And since we managed to convince since March managed to convince Avernite to let her handle things, we in turn ended up with the core flame of world bearing ourselves. And that's how we managed to finally complete the Era Nova. But yeah, so since Dan Hung, Trailblazer, and March are now the Titans of Creation, they're involved with the creating a forest and developing a forest, right? So we the Trailblazer will give out the prophecies that the people on forest will end up learning in the future, and so now we just have to wait until forest is further develops, right? Until, I guess, basically similar to how they got they were when we originally came, right? So we essentially have to go into like sleep, right? So we can wait until the river for time to flow. Right. Right. So we essentially do that, right? Let time flow. And in the meantime, while we are asleep, oh, I guess I didn't like. I guess I didn't. We should. I guess I should talk about this, right? This is a memory that you can see that is related to the end of 3.6, right? Which Evernight leaves for us. And essentially, this is more to give you crumbs for the future. But Evernight specifically tells us that in the future, there may come a point um, where March may diverge from the path of the trailblaze that we're all following, right? And Evernight basically asks if in that situation, what we will do, right? Well, yeah, I believe it's here, right? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, what if yeah, this is the question. What if one day March walks down a completely different path? And this will we'll most likely talk about this at the end, right? When we at the end of 3.7. But it has to do with what we talked about Evernight, right? Of what she most likely represents, of how she's most likely, let's say, a representative of the Enigmata. And we'll expand on that at the end. She will leave us one day. Ah, maybe. It is possible. But yeah, just keep this like part in mind, right? Because I do believe it will be important in the future. Or it's very much going to be important in the future, right? Yeah, so while we're, I guess, I guess while we're, letting Forest develop, right? And I guess, there's a lot of, in 3.7, there starts to be a lot of references and similarities to, Elysium Everlasting, right? Because up until this point, they've let's say make allusion to personality's destiny, and it wasn't really, let's say, said until this point, right? And personality's destiny is a very, I guess, important theme in the whole of the Elysium Everlasting, right? It's how do I explain personality's destiny? Hold up, let me think. I guess the personality's destiny could be like one's fate will always be. I guess you could put it in, view it as in one's fate is like their own, right? That can really, no one else can really have that fate, in a way. Did she say why she's big now? That's probably that's because she is Demiurge, right? And all of the core flames now that they're together, essentially kind of essentially, I guess, gathered back to Cyrene, who is the Demiurge, right? Although technically you don't know that she's a Demiurge just yet, but that's why she becomes Big Cyrene, because all the core flames are now together. Yeah, so yeah, so in the meantime, Cyrene decides to tell us a story. Tell us a story while we sleep and wait for time to continue. And this story is about the Seed of Remembrance. And essentially, you could argue that this is Cyrene's story. Right? Yeah, we essentially kind of end up learning about Cyrene's story while she was in the in each cycle. So kind of like a further continues the 3.6 section, when we started learning about what Cyrene went through. but also about the seed of remembrance of what our Cyrene is. Which cycle is this? It's just before the, let's say, last cycle, right? But technically, this isn't a cycle, right? Because we're now in a new future. We're no longer repeating a cycle anymore. We're no longer reset time. We're now in the future. Yeah, and then this is where we start learning what the demiurge is exactly, right? But before that happens, we start seeing with what's happening in the rest, like what the rest are doing, right, outside of Forest. And we see that okay, the Lao Fu is like actually going to get involved. That Jing Yuan is going to be the one that's going to head towards not he's not going to be the one that heads towards Iron Tomb, but it's his um ship that's going to be the one that represents the Zhenshu Alliance, with Fushuan being the one in charge. So did the Error Nova happen? Yes, the Error Nova has happened. The Error Nova has indeed happened, right? And we essentially learn, but here we essentially learn that the Fushuan being represented with the Zhenshu Alliance is gonna go to Euphorius to help against the fight against Iron Tomb, and that we kind of learn a bit more about, let's say, what Jingdu and Luocha, right? Because they're still in prisons, but even though they've given the information for the Godslayer plan, and that not all of the Laofu's, not all of the Zhenshu Alliance's battleships are going to go, right? Because Moshe Hua decides to keep some behind, right? Just in case they get attacked in the meantime, right? By another party. Where are we going now? We are now going to the future, right? So the Era Nova that was always promised. But this Era Nova isn't going to, immediately lead to Iron Tomb's death. I mean, Iron Tomb's revival. Well, birth, sorry. Yeah, so this is us just learning that, that the Zhenshu lines are actually gonna assist us, right? Which is good because we're gonna need as much help as we can to fight against Iron Tomb, right? And Iron Tomb's, I guess, birth is gonna be the point of Noose's calculation when the future of the cosmos can go one way or another, right? So it's a very important event for the whole galaxy, for the whole cosmos, right? And then we get word that the IPC are also going to help us, right? Because we see Jade and Aventurina, saying that they will send some ships, but they're also creating a vaccine, gonna try and create a vaccine against Iron Tombs for against Iron Tombs virus, right? And they're gonna hand it out to the planets and the civilizations which are most closest to Amphorius, right? And they're gonna over time, spread the vaccine even more, right? Because they're not too sure how far Iron Tomb's birth will affect, right? So they're kind of like acting as support, the IPC, but they're still helping, right? Right, and the reason why they're handing out this vaccine is because they figured out and calculated that Einstein's virus isn't just going to affect non-organic uh, organisms, so it's not just going to affect robots and machines, right? It's also most likely going to affect humans and organic life forms, so like basically any biological life form, right? But even though it'll work slower, they still need to provide a vaccine to prevent that to fully be fatal, and that's what they're gonna hand out the vaccine. So it's kind of showing that okay, we're kind of like we're joining hands, chat. We're like joining hands with everyone we've helped and worked with, right? So it's like we're kind of performing a united front, which is good because um, without that, we are all dead. And I guess we start to get, yes, we are all friends. Yes, yes. And I guess we start like learning bits and pieces of information that's not relevant now, but can be relevant in the future, right? So specifically this section, right? Since they start talking about that some of the worlds that the IPC are interested right now are also worlds where the elation has, let's say, popped up. And it doesn't really matter right now, but I feel like this is something that's, for 4.x, right? And essentially it's meant to imply that while all of this is happening, the elation is moving in the background, right? So believe that it further, let's say, for me, it further, let's say, reinforces the idea that next patch, no, not next patch, that 4.x, the next region, is most likely going to be very much related to the elation, right? Because we keep hearing stuff about the elation, right? So yeah, so it's not important now, but it's important for later on, right? And we hear about everything else, right? And even we randomly, well, not randomly, right? But we even see members from Belobog, which is cool. But also, wait, is he here? Wait, hold up, chat. Is it just um? Oh, she is here. Wait, hold up. There's something I want to check. Oh, we don't see it. God damn it. Okay, we don't see it. Okay, this is annoying. Okay, but where Himiko and Welt are right now. Sorry, I should have said this earlier. We see the POV of Himiko and Welt, right? And they clearly are in the vortex of Genesis, but specifically they're in the entrance point to the entrance point to Amphoris, right? So they're not in Amphoris yet, but they're basically at the door, right? And they're using this point, as a way to make sure that they can still communicate with the rest of the world, rest of the cosmos. And so that's the why they're here, right? And yeah, we can see, we even see we talk with Belobog, and even though Belobog are all the way, let's say, for example, far away, they're not very unlikely to get affected. But just in case, they've started to, let's say, like, make sure that any big, let's say, machinery, or specifically the engine of creation, isn't, like, let's say, directly exposed to anything, right? Because they've hit the engine of creation deep underground, right? To make sure to reduce the chance that in case bits and pieces of Iron Suma's virus, manages to reach a Belobog, right? So kind of like showing that they're also actively, being cautious, right? And I just realized this. They missed it. I mean, it would have been nice because I did say like I always kind of like get like a, let's say, like a warm feeling when I see like Himiko talking to, let's say, Bronya, right, and Seely here, right? But I just realized that Welt's also here. Yeah, that Welt's technically also here, but Welt never, let's say, like speaks in this section to any of them, which is kind of like, it's kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying because then Welt would have, let's say, like you may have seen, let's say, like a reaction, or let's say, yeah, we would have seen like an interaction with Welt and Bronya, right? And okay, well, this is throughout for 3.7, we're gonna most likely do more, let's say, crossover talks with Impact Nerd, right? Because 3.7 and all of the patches is the one where there's like a lot of crossover in a way, or references. And I guess the reason why I'm talking about World and Bronya, in case you don't know or haven't played Impact Third, is that in Impact Third, World essentially acts as Bronya's mentor, right? because World originally is the Herschel reason, and then Bronyo ends up becoming the Herschel reason after inheriting it from Worlds, and they end up having like a mentor student type of relationship, right? And we you see that in the story that it actually gets more or less fleshed out and developed, right? That's why at the time, like when we did this, I literally forgot that World's actually also here, and now that I see that World's actually here, it's like, oh come on, like they could have given us like a nice scene, but I guess it would have, let's say, been random. No, no, not random, but it would have been yeah, I guess it would have been random in a sense, right? Because technically it would be irrelevant to here. Bronya has no bike. I mean, she can make a bike. It's not impossible for her to make a bike. And yeah, I guess this then also, I guess, informs anyone who hasn't done stuff like the War Dance event for the Lao Fu that, the Gensho Alliance and the Yarilo 6 are in friendly terms, right? So kind of like expands on, you know, world building a bit more if someone hasn't done some of the events, right? Because I don't think if you didn't do the War Dance event, you wouldn't know that Yarilo 6 and Gensho Alliance are, in good, like, friends. Because, yeah, the War Dance is where that happened, which with Luca's story. Yeah. And it wasn't too bad. It was actually not that bad, the War Dance storyline. Well, specifically Luca's storyline, right? Because the War Dance has two sections. It has the Hule stuff with Fei Xiao, and then it also has the Luca story, right? Of why like he's in the competition, right? To fulfill the promise of one of the not one of the leaders of of Belobog, but an ancestor, right? Which is like it's like pretty cool, right? But yeah, so we see more of you say it's like Fu Xuanyin is going to be the one that's going to come, and we kind of see like everyone, you know, we're all working together essentially, right? Oh, and I guess that also, how back in the Lao Fu, after we helped them against Ventilia, and how, as a gift for, and proof of friendship between the two factions, Jing Yuan gave the actual Express a Jade Abacus, right? And with this Jade Abacus, we're able to get assistance and backup from the Gensho Alliance. And what this is basically saying is that this situation, this event, is so important that you don't have to count this as, you using the Jade Abacus, right? That it's too important that, you know, it's essentially telling us that we still have the Jade Abacus as a plot point for maybe a future event, right? Because we technically use it in Penacony, but when we used the Jade Abacus in Penacony, that was in the Penacony of Enna's dream. So we never actually used it there, right? And we managed to solve the Penacony disaster without actually relying on it. But yeah, it's just kind of like reminding I guess, the player that, okay, that's still a thing, that we haven't used it for this event. Yeah, and this is just the IPC about how the IPC's, helping with us. But specifically, Avenging tells us that we should really be part of the IPC. I guess it's kind of like further established that, or further enforced that the IPC isn't united under one front. That there's like the strategic investment department, and then there's like the sales and marketing departments, right? And eventually, kind of insists that we should, if there ever comes a point that, let's say, the sales development department tries and gets too friendly with us, remember that Aventurines, group the strategic investment departments are the ones we're actually friendly with. That we should be wary of the other departments, right? Because yeah, that the it was that the 10 Stone Huts were the ones who worked with us, right? Which I guess this is what's happening now is like reinforcing the well, helping the player remember like all the different plot points that have happened so far, right? Because there's like a fair amount of different plot points, right, that aren't really, let's say, related to each other at this point. And this is just acting as a point to, you know, make us remember that. And, further expanding that, there's like bad blood between Diamond and Oswaldo, right? And if you remember, Diamond is the leader of the 10 Stonehearts. He is one of the emanators of preservation, and that Oswaldo is the leader of the other department in the IPC. He's specifically the one which Boothill was like after, right? That we know that Boothill's after him, and why? We don't really know so far. Well, technically you have like an idea of why he could be after Oswaldo, but it has to do with, let's say, Boothill's character story. But that's not important right now. We can maybe talk about it another time or when it gets relevant again. But yeah, so that's what's happening, and we're trying to get into contact with the IPC. Sorry, not the IPC, the family. Penacony, but no one in Penacony, like the leaders of Penacony, aren't really, let's say, responding. Instead, Robin is using her own funds and her own resources, and she's gonna help by acting as, let's say, like the medical team for this fight. So even though, let's say, the family itself aren't supporting us, Robin is using her resources to support us. So yay, Robin! Fuck the families. Uh what? Boot Hill's story continues in 4.x. Um, it could be, right? Maybe we don't know, because it might be something like with the because Boot Hill stuff might be also treated similar to how the Lao Fu's not the Gensho Alliance storyline is, right? Where it's happening in the background and we'll get updates here and there of what it is, what's happening there, right? Of how it's introduced in the main story, but then further developed in like an event or something, right? Because it was in the main story of the Lao Fu storyline where the stuff with Luocha and Jing Liu working together and then for something, and it wasn't expanded until the War Dance event where we learned that the reason that Jing Liu and Luocha are working together is that they're working on a plan called the Godslayer plan to fight against the abundance using a fragment of the dead propagation, and that they want essentially the Gensho Alliance's assistance to make this plan succeed. And we learned that on an event, not well, technically it's not an event, right? It was a continuance thing, but it wasn't, let's say, a main story quest, right? Wait, hold up. Is it treated as main story quest in the Atlas? Because it was in the Penacony section. Yeah, it's considered like a side story, right? Because if you look at the um, sorry, if you look at the Fate Atlas, right, you see this Love story, and then it goes to Penacony, right? And here is like treated as a side story, and this is where the storyline gets further expanded with the Luocha and Jinglu stuff. It's not. It's treated as more as a side story rather than main story, which is in this line. The same thing with like the rapper stuff and the UBW collab, right? But regardless, back to 3.7. Um, I guess I was just using that to explain that with Starro, there's like a lot of moving points, right? I guess to further reinforce the idea that there's a lot of moving points in Starro, right? It's not just Amphorius that you have to remember. I guess similar to how, let's say, in Genshin, of how there's like a lot of moving points when, let's say, the Nathan storyline was happening, right? Because in the background, technically, there was still stuff with like Albedo and shit, right? And now this is, it's kind of like basically similar, similar situation. Every flaw, let's say, events in Greek mythology. Okay, the Greek mythology doesn't really matter. That's just, let's say, like references, right? Like, oh, cool, that's like neat. Okay, I know where they like have that idea from. Like similar to how like my day's invincibility is like a callback or reference to Achilles' story, right? With Achilles' heel. That's like stuff with like the Greek mythos. I mean, videos. I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. So yeah. I know since we know we've contacted with everyone and shown that okay, we can still we've got signal essentially to the outside world. Worlds, Himiko, Sunday, and Black Sun finally actually come into Amphorius after 7 patches. So yeah, after 7 patches, they're finally inside Amphorius. Well, I guess yeah, physically inside Amphorius after so many patches, right? Well, all the people. Well, how did I get in? Now that we completed the Aeronova and there's no wall of remembrance blocking the way, people can come into Amphorius now. So there's no longer a barrier that there was at the start. So people can, if they wish to, come into Amphorius. And yeah, so they noticed that oh, everyone's like missing, right? That this place should be like this seems like a public area, right? But there's no one here, so it's kind of like weird, right? It's like midday, so it's weird that this is like empty. And then they get reached back to the red jellyfish. And I guess March tries to act suspicious, or let's say not suspicious, mysterious, but she gets immediately caught out, right? She gets immediately caught out by Himiko, I think, if I recall. Right? Uh, yeah, they get immediately caught out by Himiko, and March essentially ends up telling them that the reason why no one's here is because all the people from Forest basically getting ready for the a prophecy. Didn't she go to sleep? Yeah, she went to sleep, but now well, the one who technically went to sleep is our our the Trailblazer. Well, March, who basically can go along the river of time, since since she's the demigod of time, or the Titan of time now, she doesn't really have to write because she wouldn't really feel the effects of time. The same with Dan Hung, who's the demigod of time, right? Because he's basically in charge and making sure that the whole of Amphoria is kind of like developed well, right? So they don't really have to go to sleep while we, as Kefle, do. Right? And this is the point, basically similar to when we came into Amphoria, right? So things are more or less developed well. And so yeah, so the reason why no one's here is because like the people are waiting for the prophecy from Kefle, the world bearing titan. So us, right? And I think Dan Hung shows up here, right? No, Dan Hung doesn't show up here. But yeah, so Evernight, sorry, not Evernight, March takes us to where all the people are, which are the Dawn Clouds, where where Kefle's body is, which is technically our body now. And yeah, so everyone's like waiting for the fulfillment of the prophecy, which is, if I recall, um, waiting for the awakening of Kefle. If I recall, that's what the prophecy is. What they're waiting. Yeah, the awakening of Kefle, of the world-bearing Titan. Yeah, so basically we now are awake after being asleep for some time, and since we're the world-bearing Titan, we essentially tell everyone that basically that what we're Amphoris is after is to reach the skies, right? That Amphoris will no longer be, a secular world that will actually join the cosmos, and that's what they want to do, right? We never see him awaken before. Who? Kefle. No, they never saw Kefle awaken before, because before Kefle was just, let's say, giving prophecies, right? But they never, let's say, left this place, right? Because they were always holding the Dawn device. And yeah, that was like in usual cases when, things, let's say, weren't as stable or as, let's say, good until now, right? Because in this Era Nova, the things that we would be worried about aren't really going to happen, right? Because we're the ones that created this Era Nova, and not we're the ones that created this, I guess, future, and not a future that was predestined to fall to destruction, like all of previous, like the previous iterations of Warriors. Yeah. Yeah, and this is essentially us awakening, and us going to continue the Trailblaze mission. And I guess while this is happening, while we're waking up, we see that Herta and Screwlum are also now also inside Amphorius. Since Amphorius is technically open now, they can freely come in and don't have to, project themselves into Amphorius. So it's like good. What's the Trailblaze mission? I guess one way to describe the Trailblaze mission is just to go out and into a journey, right? To meet different civilizations, to experience like different worlds and their journeys, right? And if needed, take part of that world's journey, right? And that's technically what the Trailblaze mission is, right? And at different points in that journey, each nameless can depart at any stop and stay at any stop, right? Similar to how Mikao, who was a nameless, left the train and stayed in Penacony, right? So yeah, that's kind of what the Trailblaze journey is, right? You join in the journey, you can join the journey, travel the journey, and you can technically leave when you feel like it's your time to leave, right? Or that you should leave. And this Trailblaze journey is them backtracking Akavili's journey, because Akavili's the one who joined different planets together via the Silver Rail. And the Silver Rail is what the Astral Express travels on, right? Okay. So yeah, so Screwlam and Hursa are now, you know, essentially in the tomb of the Nameless Titan, right? which was described as the Colonel by other knights, and they essentially want to basically figure out more things, right? To see if they can discover anything in this region, right? Because would be, if anything is hidden here, if there was a place that had, let's say, like valuable information, well, it would be this place, right? Because this is, the kernel where the core of Amphoris would technically be. Right, and so we have to. So they're basically seeing if they can find the truth of the 13th Titan, of the Demiurge. And so, yeah. Because they don't believe of what Xander told them, right? That he's the one that killed the Demiurge, that there's no more Demiurge. Because, why should we believe him, of all people, right? He's obviously gonna, lie to us. What's the Matrix and what's the Dawn Device? Well, the Dawn Device is it's kind of like a machine or an object with Aquila, the Sky Titan, created and gave to Kefle, right? And this device was meant to act as a pseudo sun to keep the Black Tide away from Okima. And the Matrix is basically like the core zone of Amphorius, where all of Amphorius's data is held. That's essentially what the Matrix is, right? Where you would find like the master control. Oh, hey, Azrael. So yeah, so that's what the Matrix and that's what the Dawn Device is. So yeah, so they're here to try and find things, right? And I guess while this happens, I guess we see Screwlim keep asking Herta, what are they gonna do if they what is the plan if in case we fail? You've found a show. Well, that's another show, right? What are we gonna do if we fail, right? Because yes, we have a plan, but we should also maybe have like a backup plan just in case, right? Just in case everything goes to shit. So, and Herta keeps going like, She gives the phrase that we turn the lock into the key. And it's like, I guess you're not really meant to realize what exactly the lock into the key means, right? But you kind of like, I guess, realize it later, right? Actually, no, you can kind of realize it's hard to, let's say, figure it out what lock into the key is, but I guess it is technically possible to figure it out, right? Since, you, I'm not sure how many people would have figured it out, right? But because I obviously didn't figure it out until just now what exactly this meant. No, I figured it out later, but I didn't figure it out at this point. But this would have been in reference to what Liger said in the previous patch, where he wanted of how Iron Tomb was technically a headless giant, and he wanted to use Iron Tomb to essentially eat news and essentially Iron Tomb would then act as a way to control news, right? And if you think about it like that way, you can see that Iron Tomb is technically the lock to news, right? Because he's gonna contain and eat news, or devour news. However, what Hurt is technically saying here is that she is gonna, rather than Iron Tomb being a lock to news, she's gonna use Iron Tomb as a key to news, right? Yeah, she is the key. Yeah, rather than her, she is the key. She's gonna turn Iron Tomb into a key for news, for her to access news, which does happen later. But we'll talk about it when we get there. It is like an interesting analogy. I think at this point, when like she mentioned it, I don't think I completely got it right. And I questioned it, but I didn't fully realized like what it actually meant. I thought she accessed News to destroy him. No, because News technically doesn't have, let's say, fighting capability. He just has the calculations to predict what's or try and calculate what's going to happen in the future. What she used, well, we'll talk about it in a sec, but essentially she used News to see into the future in a way to calculate the future. And yeah. But Screwdem also realizes that if this is what she's gonna do, um, that is not, let's say, the safest thing, right? So he doesn't really want her to do that, right? Because uh, Herta could die from this. Couldn't she do that earlier? No, she couldn't do that earlier because if you remember back to 3.7, sorry, not 3.7, 2.7 in the Sunday story, at the end when we, did the Herta section, she tried to simulate how she would, let's say, try and contact News, right? And just to try and make contact News, try to get News's attention, already used all of Herta's space station's power, right? But even with that, it wasn't enough to fully get News's attention, right? And it didn't last long enough, right? And had uh, too many, too many issues, right? Trying to contact News with using that method, and so she couldn't really do it beforehand. And now the Scepter, which is essentially the massive giant supercomputer, which was originally a part of News, well, that's a let's say that's a she's not gonna get like come across a opportunity like this, right? And there's a much as not as much more, but it like is more likely to succeed if she uses the scepter as a conduit instead, right? Yeah, yeah. Basically, yeah. That's okay. That's a better way to put it. The scepter would have a better Wi-Fi connection to News than she herself trying to do it, right? Yeah, that's actually a much better analogy. Yeah, she has a better connection with the scepter. Yeah, and so yeah. So to access the central of the matrix, we use I guess we kind of use like a ship that Skrullum created, right, called the Mistletoe. And yeah, so this is how we use what we use to travel through the matrix, right, for the kernel to try and find more information. How does the scepter even look like? I'm not sure how the scepter looks like. Just imagine it's like a giant. Hold on, hold up. Let me see. Because technically, I don't think we've seen an image of the scepter, right? Mm, I guess this is what the scepter can look like, or a scepter can look like, yeah. Because this is like a example of what a scepter can look like. So like a giant space station, if anything. Yeah, that's what a scepter can look like. And this is specifically the Emperor scepter. Yeah. What was Cyrene's Moonblade? Cyrene's Moonblade wasn't a scepter. Cyrene's Moonblade was essentially what contained Fully's power to reset time. Yeah, Cyrene's scepter wasn't. Cyrene's Moonblade wasn't a scepter. It was just something that contained Fully's power. Then Oryx gave that. Yes, Oryx gave it to her, but Oryx was technically also uh not like it technically wasn't given to her by Oryx because it was technically given to her by Fully. I mean, we'll talk about this more later, but which technically it was given to her by herself, right, in the future. It's just that she thought that she was given to it by Ornix. Uh, yeah, so it's just them, trying. I guess it's just Skrullum basically saying that no one really wants her to throw her life away, right? And he also doesn't want it, right? So it's kind of like alluding to. It's kind of alluding to the first possible future of Amphorius, right? Because if you remember the Exotail trailer, the one that showed the possible futures if we never went on Forest, right? That if we went to Lechaka, Ironton would have been rebirthed, and Herta would have prematurely died in that event. And what's I guess Skrullum saying here is that that might happen, right? That might happen if things go wrong. That Herta might prematurely die. But Herta doesn't really care, right? Because she still believes that that they need to find the key of the Demiurge to fight back. Yeah, and so this is like us going trying to go in, right? And then we see that the Matrix is kind of fucked up. That it's very destroyed. Why is the Demiurge guilty for anything? The Demiurge isn't guilty of anything. Yeah, the Demiurge isn't guilty of anything. Because technically, the Demiurge was what the Scepter was originally extrapolating, right? The Demiurge was the Scepter's answer to uh, a question of the future, very cool. But Xander, when he found the Scepter, supposedly killed the Demiurge and then, replaced the Scepter's what the Scepter was then extrapolating for. Yeah, so this is yeah. So then we learned that Xander used the Stellaron to quote unquote kill the Demiurge to make the space for him, right? So that he could instead extrapolate the destruction. Yeah, because this is what yeah, because here's where Herta like realizes that the Demiurge was the original target of the Scepter's extrapolation. Yeah, that this is what the Scepter was originally, calculating that the Scepter was originally calculating the Demiurge. But because of Ligus and his interference, the Scepter was no longer looking for the Demiurge. Instead, now it was looking for destruction, and which then ended with the creation of Iron Tomb. And and I guess the reason why, and specifically what the Scepter was looking for or trying to answer, was the prime mover of life. Because the Scepter was originally looking for what is the prime mover of life, right? Which, if you recall, was basically like what causes life to, evolve and continue, right? And the Daimyo, and supposedly the Scepter's answer or believed answer was the Demiurge. That the Demiurge is what is the prime mover of life. But obviously, Skrullum didn't agree with that, so he got rid of the Demiurge and replaced the supposed answer to the destruction. Yeah. Yeah, that's technically why the Demiurge isn't, let's say, like guilty of anything. Because the Demiurge was just, let's say, the Scepter's original answer to the prime mover of life. Okay. What's the barrier here for? This is just something that that Liger set up so that no one can get to him, right? Because what we learn is that past all of these barriers, because this is the real world. This isn't inside on Forest, right? This is the inner workings of the Scepter, and we can assume that Lygus made all these barriers so that no one can get to it, right? Because past all these barriers is the data of Forest, right? It's the Exomyth, because this is where you can get to the Exomyth. Yeah, and this is where you start to realize that um Evernight wasn't like Evernight's conclusion was based off information that she didn't of what she assumed, right? Because she thought that the tomb was empty, right? Or she believed that the tomb was empty from the start. But we end up realizing that it wasn't, right? That it wasn't empty. Instead, that the Demiurge was the listener, and that the remembrance is actually also kind of evil in this section, right? But obviously, we don't really realize what the actual truth until like afterwards, right? Yeah, and this is where like you break the last barrier, and that this is where you guys select last barrier, and you can see that the Exomyth is in that direction, but it's kind of like being blocked off. And that opposite of the Exomyth is where the 13th Titan should have, like, let's say, been, right? But you can see that the when you want to approach that area, when you want to approach where the 13th Titan was, like that whole area around it is destroyed, right? Which was a result from Lygus using the Stellaron to try and wipe it out. Because we can't enter this place. If I recall, you can enter this place, but you have to collect all of the beetles first around all of the other maps, which I need to do, so I can actually go back in, because apparently there's a message inside. What's the name of the game? Looks so fun. Well, Theo's Inspector. The game is called Honkai Star Rail, which I'm pretty sure I'm in the category. Yes, I am. It is called Honkai Star Rail. It is it's a decent game. It's a turn-based gacha game. That story is enjoyable, although you also have to come into realization that when you play the story, just assume you're playing a visual novel, because it's gonna be a lot of story in between, let's say, action points. It's a decent game. I say decent because while I do enjoy the story, the let's say the turn-based nature of the game is not really that complicated. It's very it's not really that complicated, because what the only really stats that really matter are what speed and I guess crit rate, crit damage, right? There's not too many there's not too many variables that you have to take into account, right? What's semi-peak except impact that? Okay, even though let's say I do have by story is more complicated than combat. I mean that's not wrong. I mean even though, so let's say I have bias towards impact that, which I do show multiple times. I know that impact that itself isn't also that say that complicated of a game, right? Because it's very much learn the rotation then do the rotation, right? There's not too many intricacies in between, right? I mean, there are like let's say things you can optimize, right? With let's say like rotations and stuff that you can do to manipulate or improve your score at like the highest level of play. But it's like not. It's not really things that I would say are very expressive, right? This is a friendly game. In what in terms of what? I mean, I would say overall it's a friendly game. Um, if you mean like money wise, uh, to be honest, I would say yeah. I would say that is very. You can play HSR free to play. Like it's not really that hard to play it free to play, even though a lot of people would say that it's not free to play. It's like very free to play. You just have to, let's say, play it somewhat optimal in the case that try and work on one team at a time. Don't put all your eggs on too many baskets at the same time, right? Because then you're gonna spread yourself out too thin. But yeah, I would say like it is quite free to play, quite free to play friendly. Because technically you don't always need to pull for the light gun, which is essentially the weapon, right? It is nice, but there's like decent alternatives, right? This game has a lot of fan art. Yes, the game has a lot of fan art, and a lot of it is like pretty nice. The fandom must be cool. um, most of the time, yes. Most of the time, yes. Just ignore the part of the fandom which resides in Twitter, because they can be very annoying. But apart from that, yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay. So so they essentially end up finding the exomyth, right? And seeing if they can find Ligus, right? But where Ligus? Ligus not here, right? Because if anyone's gonna have answers, it's gonna be Ligus, right? And they're trying to pinpoint his location and end up pinpointing his location. Um, they end up pinpointing his location in where the tomb of the the tomb of the Forgotten Titan, right? The 13th Titan, which is here, right? This you know what? I think I made the joke already while when we did the story. I'm not gonna make it again about the RC joke again, but yeah, don't harm me as if you like didn't think it, as if you didn't see the imagery. Um, but just you, no. But yeah, so they're looking for Ligus, and you know they try and find Ligus. Uh, yeah, I guess this in this point is like her to putting, let's say, more validity to the point that Xander was never truly able to get rid of the Demiurge, right? Because even though he supposedly destroyed and killed the Demiurge, he's like put so many insurances in case something like came after him, right? And this being the Demiurge, so he in reality didn't actually think that he actually got rid of the Demiurge, right? He still feared it, right? And I guess Hurt is starting to start to realize what exactly is the Demiurge, right? And more or less Hurt at this one has realized who the Demiurge is, right? And yeah, so we find Xander Ligers. I'm gonna keep like going through each one, like at the tomb, right? At the destroyed tomb where the Demiurge was originally at. And what we find is specifically his head. We just find his head. Nobody around. Nobody, just head. Which means he can still give head. Really, what is wrong with me? Um what happened? I mean, we tried to find Ligers in the Exomith where technically his lab was, but he wasn't there. And he left a message behind saying that it all ends at the Tomb of the Forgotten, which is, the where the Demiurge was, being essentially researched, which Lagos destroyed. Well, which he destroyed, and we went to it, and we see Lagos' head here, right? And the reason why there's only one head and no body is because before, you know how he was technically being bonded to Anaxa in 3.6, the way to basically get rid of Anaxa is he destroyed the rest of his body and it's just his head left. We don't remember. What do you mean we don't remember? It literally happened at the start of 3.6. And it was shown at, well, not shown at the end of 3.6, but at the end of 3.6 when Anaxa was asking about what the Demiurge is, and when Lagos gave the analogy of what exactly Iron to me is, of how he's a headless giant, uh, during that conversation, the only reason why Xander answered Anaxa was because he said that he was gonna remove Anaxa from his body, and I guess this is how he removed Anaxa from his body by getting rid of the rest of his body except his head. And yeah, I guess this is just Xander showing that the heart of Amphorius is the Demiurge. How did he exit the Exomith after? I mean, he technically could have rolled his head. Because he's just a head, so he probably could have like rolled his head, like controlled some machinery, right, to get his head here. I was like, technically, it's multiple ways to get his head here, right? Because because he still has admin permissions in Amphorius. Although after he, removed his head, he no longer had them. But yeah, so then we stuck him here. Uh, we did, but then you know we kind of gave him free reign because we were like busy with other stuff, right? Because because Anaxa was, I guess, used as a shackle to um Ligus, right? Well, Xander, and then Xander got rid of that shackle by blowing his body up, right? Yeah, I guess it's just talking about how I guess it's just telling us that Finan has already been absorbed by Iron Tomb. That Finan is the perfect vessel for Iron Tomb's destruction, his rage, right? Because all of the destruction and rage that Finan, built up over time. Yeah, this is basically Xander then is gonna tell the future, the truth about Philia, about Cyrene, right? And supposedly a lie by remembrance. How did he get absorbed? How did who? Finan. Cause in the 3.4 animated short, when he basically let go, since he could let go finally, and he in the path space of destruction, he you know fought Zephyros, kind of got curb stomped by Zephyros, and then tried to burn himself away and managed to strike the nuke. So essentially, Finon was at such a weakened state that Iron Tomb was able to absorb him or absorb his data, since technically he was still a data form, right? So Iron Tomb just absorbed him. And yeah, I guess this is where we start to learn about the story behind the Seed of Remembrance and Cyrene. The world sprouted from a seed that, from that fully told her that the world sprouted from a seed, and that this seed grew and ended up becoming Amphorius, right? Iron Tomb never cycled with us. No, because Iron Tomb this whole time wasn't born yet. Like during this whole time, Iron Tomb was developing until he finished developing. And yeah, and we learn of how the daughter of Ades Elise quietly came into the world. And yeah, that the daughter was the first gift from, supposedly was the first gift from Oryx. That the child is the gift of the Titans, pink hair, sharp ears. She was born to be the priest of time, and this obviously talking about Cyrene. Is this day one of Amphorius? I would specifically say day one of Amphorius, but yeah, I mean you can argue, you can think of it like day one of Amphorius, but specifically, this is Cyrene's day one, right? Because immediately the prophecy which Cyrene was given was, "You shall fade when the flower blooms, for every ending begets a beginning," which I guess does kind of tell you the ending of Amphorius, right? This does tell you the ending of Amphorius, with you shall fade when the flower blooms, which the flower blooming being when Amphorius blooms, and starts to become a real, like an actual real planet, and for every ending begets a beginning, right? And that, okay, this is kind of talking about the end of 3.7, but with the ending begets the beginning being like every ending needs a beginning, and so she shall go back to the beginning. It's like, I guess I'm I guess I can figure out the ending through this, but I feel like you need like a lot of context to even try and use this prophecy to figure out the ending. Because I can only, I mean, I guess if I read more into this or thought more about it at the time, maybe I could have, let's say, predicted a bit more. But I'm pretty sure I didn't. I'm pretty sure I just read it, put it in my mind, and then went after, right? So yeah, yeah. Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and I guess this is also like another similarity to Impact Third, right? Where Cyrene wasn't just like, she wasn't born from, let's say, I mean, I did say there's like a lot of, let's say, callbacks and similarities, right? But Cyrene wasn't just born like a normal child, right? Like with a mother and a father, like with parents. Cyrene technically just appeared and was seen as the gift, a blessing from Oryx, which is very similar to how Alicia was born, right? Because Alicia was also like born in a similar manner, where she wasn't born from, like, let's say, as a child of like a mother or father or parents, right? She technically just came to life as essentially a child of Honkai, of Honkai, right? Of finality, because she just came to be, right? Although you know the difference being, although the difference being that the people, the villagers of Vladivostok, of her village, didn't think that she was, let's say, like a didn't think that she was like a let's say like a like a deity or anything like that. They just thought like she was another child, right? Wasn't Ellie born as an evil entity? Well, if you think as Honkai being evil, then yes. If you think as Honkai is inherently evil, then you would say yes. But this is the thing where the stuff about character's destiny comes into play, right? Because even though Alicia was, let's say, born as a child of Honkai, right, as a Hersha, because she was a naturally born Hersha, because of Alicia's character, of her personality, of her ego, she wasn't evil, right? And it was her ego that, her personality, her character, is what defined her destiny. That is what her destiny and future became. That is, I guess that's more expanding on the character's destiny phrase, right? And then that character's destiny also applies to Cyrene here, right? Because even though Cyrene is technically revered as a child of Ornyx, the personality and the ego that she ended up obtaining from, you know, Cyrene, as Cyrene, made it so that future wasn't, let's say, like an evil thing or anything, right? You know, at this point, you don't really know about the relationship between Seed of Remembrance and Cyrene and Mem and shit. But yeah, I guess you could argue that Alicia was born as more or less like a blank slate, right? Like every person, right? Every person is born as a blank slate, and it's your nurture is what helps develop you, right? Helps develop your ego, your personality. Yeah, and then this is more about I guess what uh I guess what she experienced, and specifically Adis Alicia, right? Yeah, because she says that, yeah, this is more to do with the personality is destiny, right? Where a world the world was gentle to me, so I grew up to be gentle as well, right? To do with like how she was nurtured. Yeah, is that basically goes on more about that? Yeah. And we can see that the seed of memory seems to be developing more, right? It seems to be like getting formation and developing itself. How she remembered something that didn't happen yet? Well, wait, what do you mean? How does she remember something that didn't happen yet? Because she technically hasn't remembered. What's being told right now is, I guess from the viewpoint of Cyrene. Well, Mem, right? Isn't the cube before she was born? Yes, this is the cube as Cyrene is telling the story, right? As Mem. But Mem has, let's say, come to the acceptance that, because before, I guess, she, you know, fully became the demiurge, she didn't, let's say, want to accept that, you know, she was originally the seed of remembrance, the cube, right? So she's gotten the memories of her being the cube at this point, of being the seed of remembrance of how she, I guess, was nurtured, right? Using via Cyrene's memories. Because she's like slow, it's like over time, Mem, or our Cyrene, has essentially slowly gotten her memories back, right? And that's why we start to see this, right? About the cage, about how the cube developed, of how in each cycle, Cyrene came here and met the cube and told her stories, right? To keep to keep the memory of Amphorius alive, right? Because Cyrene did this because she believed that this way, Fully would keep remembering Amphorius, so Amphorius wouldn't let it be forgotten, right? Which gave Cyrene the power in the Moonblade, which which essentially kind of like kept the Moonblade powered up, so that Finan could keep continuing resetting time, right? And that's why Cyrene, kept doing this, right? And by doing this, she, ended up interacting with the Seed of Remembrance, and slowly the Seed of Remembrance was basically being developed by Cyrene, right? That's why the Seed 093, ego, right? It was basically developing its own ego based on Cyrene. And so this like basically showing that, and you can see of how the ego, after several different meetings with Cyrene, it started to essentially take Cyrene's shape, right? From Forest won't be forgotten. And then slowly, like, the Seed of Remembrance started to have her similar speech pattern. And then, she actually transformed into Cyrene, right? Here. Oh, she starts to slowly get Cyrene's shape, right? You can see it. Where is it? Is it here? Yeah, you can see it here. Right? How she gets Mem's shape. She gets Mem's shape and then she ends up forming Cyrene's shape. And then, ends up becoming to fully develop the Demiurge, right? Because the big Cyrene is the Demiurge's imagination of what Cyrene would look like if she had the chance and opportunity to fully grow, right? Because technically, Cyrene never got the opportunity to fully mature, right? And the shape which Big Cyrene is what the Demiurge believes of how she would have looked like if she had ever had that opportunity, right? And then this is essentially Cyrene's journey, right? The bad experiencing Cyrene's journey, right? Where she's born as the supposed child of Orynyx, the time with Cyrene and Finan in Aegis Elysiae in the peaceful times when they spend with the fairies, the time of her time in the Flame Chase journey, symbolized by Aglaia and Tribes, right? Then the ending of the Flame Chase journey here, well, the ending of their cycle, and they found out everything, and then the cycle of the eternal recurrence with, Finan ending up Caslana becoming the Flame Reaver and then resetting everything to prevent the Era Nova until now, right? Where we managed to complete everything and basically, quote unquote, save Amphorius. Why didn't we see her in the first two cycles? Who? See who? Cyrene. Okay, we wouldn't have seen her in the first cycle when we first entered Amphorius was because she would have already had been killed by um she would have already been killed by what's his name? Flame Reaver on the 36th cycle. Because Cyrene always dies very early on. He's always killed very early on. And in the 37th cycle, when when in the cycle we experienced without Finan, there was no Cyrene there. There was no Cyrene there because Why wasn't there Cyrene in the 37th cycle? Let me try and figure this out. There would have been no Cyrene there because the Seed of Remembrance was no longer in the Seed of Remembrance, so Mem was no longer where in the tomb where it was being developed. Yeah, because she was there as Mem. Because she was there as Mem. There was no need for the Cyrene, who was supposedly quote unquote child of Orynyx, wouldn't have been born there because technically she already existed as Mem or as Cyrene then. So that's why we didn't see Cyrene in the 36th or the 37th cycle. 36 because she was already killed at the start by Flame Reaver. 37th because we already had Cyrene with us, right? So she couldn't be there. So she couldn't quote unquote be born. Yeah. That's why. So this is where Cyrene grew up as gentle, so she became gentle, right? And it's the Flame Chase journey where losses are inevitable in the Flame Chase, right? And this is the hero's journey, which was Finance journey. Yeah. As long as there's two Cyrenes, there will always be a blank space, and Peach will always be here. So there's only one Cyrene, Peach isn't there, right? But it comes into later on, right? What is a blank space? Um, the blank space, I guess, is the possible future of Amphoreus, right? Because the Aeronova, I guess you can see kind of like the blank space is the Aeronova, right? But as long as there was no Aeronova because of Finance Journey, there could always be two Cyrenes, right? So as long as there's two Cyrenes, there will always be a blank space. So as long as the Aeronova wasn't complete, there would always be two Cyrenes. Because a blank space is essentially when Mem, the Seed of Remembrance, doesn't have all of the core flames with her and becomes a demiurge, right? An incomplete demiurge, essentially. Right. Yeah, and this is essentially, the Seed of Remembrance, aka the demiurge, feeling more and more or less fully developed, right? And would be just before we enter the last cycle. We enter the 35th cycle, right? Or sorry, the 36th cycle. What does she need to become the demiurge for? What does she need to become the demiurge? Essentially for the completion of the Aeronova. Because although she is a demiurge, let's say she doesn't have that. In my opinion, she doesn't have that capability of the demiurge until the Aeronova is complete. So all of the core flames are complete together, right? Which didn't really happen until the end of 3.6. Because technically, I guess let me clear this up. Technically, Mem Cyrene is the demiurge. She's always a demiurge. It's not like she's never been a demiurge. She's always been the demiurge. But until all of the core flames are together and the Aeronova gets completed, she doesn't have the. I guess it's kind of like she doesn't have the memories of her being the demiurge and her knowing that she is the demiurge. Because you have to remember that when Mem woke up and we met Mem had no memories. Like Mem had no memories at all of anything, right? And was over time, the journey with us, Mem slowly started getting memories, right? And then started to become Cyrene, but she still didn't have the memories of her being and realization that she is the demiurge. And it wasn't until we completed the Era Nova that she actually understood and realized that she is the demiurge. Yeah, in this Era Nova, she kept her memories. She kept her memories because she was no longer in the cage. How? How did she keep the memories? Uh, because a blank space was filled. Because you know how it said that as long as the blank space, as long as the Era Nova wasn't complete, there would always be two Syrenes. But now that the Era Nova happened and the blank space is filled with her memories and understanding, is how she would manage to keep it, right? And I guess also because of her attachment to us, right? Her connection to us. Yeah, this is like where you start to understand more about Cyrene, right? Or specific, well, Cyrene and Mem. How did the Flame Reaver keep his memories every time? Because the Flame Reaver never died. The Flame Reaver always because Lana like always kept going, right? And when he got to the point where the original Castellano was, let's say, worn out, he made it so that he transferred all of his memories and experiences to the final of that era by using the Moonblade, which has the power for Fully, right? And Fully is the Aeon of Remembrance. So that's how he powered. That's how he kept going and kept and transferred his memories to the next final via the usage of the Z Moonblade, because that contained the power of remembrance. That the flawless crystal flower doesn't actually have a heart, nor does it the flower understand what love is. Yeah, the flawless crystal flower being her, because she's actually is the heart. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the seed of remembrance, or the flower of remembrance in this case, goes out and tries to find that love, right? Then the little fairy will see in each shard on the ground that holds the reflection of her eyes. Huh. Rebellion against Blade, writing and ending the sword and flower and the flower zone shattering. And then I guess this can be, let's say, as a anagram to analogy to, let's say, what Serene, let's say, went through. But I guess it can also be an analogy to Fully, right? So how the little fairy, which I guess can in a way represent Fully, and each shot of that fairy is a reflection of the different. Actually, no, never mind. Scrap what I just said. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense what I was just saying. Yeah, ignore what I just said. It doesn't really matter. Actually, no, it can work. It can work. Because Fully as an Aeon is meant to be flawless, but once it cracks, there being the children of Asnarava, is no longer flawless, they can have a heart. I guess that can be seen as a, let's say, as a way to a reference to that. Although you would not, no, I don't think anyone would get like that, see an analogy like that until you know the end of 3.7. So then I wonder if it was originally meant to be seen as that then. of the road that so it could be seen as that. Maybe. Feels Dankman. Yeah, it might be something that I'm reaching here, right? It could be something that I'm reaching here, right? But what's Cyrene is saying here, there's like two meanings to it, right? Um, let's see. Yeah, there's like two meanings, right? Where Cyrene talks about how the story which the Seed of Remembrance is writing or has written would be a flawless story. However, it's a story that technically has no heart. However, once that story was broken and let's say she herself experienced it, it would, let's say, have a heart in a way, right? But and I guess this is like a reference of how the fighting to the loveless story of, succumbing to Iron Tomb, and the love comes from, defying that fate. But this then when she's, when it goes to this section, you can also say that it can be seen as, let's say, as an analogy to Fully, right? But Fully as an Aeon is to be flawless, right? But the shards of Fully, the children of Sonarava, because they are flawed, they can then have a heart, right? They can be understand love. Who broke her heart? I mean, technically, it would be Amphoris's original fate, is what you could say is broke her heart, right? Because originally, Amphoris is just meant to be a thing that's meant to be destroyed to enhance and develop Iron Tomb. So it would be Amphoris's original fate, and then she broke that flawlessness to fight Destiny and defy Destiny. And I guess that's what Cyrene understood, and what the Flower of Memory, Mem, I guess is trying to then looks to try and understand love, right? Yeah. Then May, and then there's just a more like looking into the story, right? A journey where all starts carefully picking stories and writing them down. Interpretation. So as I wrote, yeah. About to preserve everything and try and carry on. Okay. And all remembrances within the story, yeah. Like all remembrances, memories within the story. And I guess this is our Cyrene Mem, like understanding of like this is when she's, let's say, has gotten her understanding of love, right? Even though she herself doesn't understanding realize just yet, right? Because Cyrene, the other Cyrene, tells her that that the actual mover of life is, right? Of what the actual prime mover of life, which the demiurge originally represented. Because Ligus is the one that changed it so that the prime move of life would be destruction. But supposedly, what we can infer is that the actual original prime move of life wasn't destruction; instead, it was love. How did she meet her? This is the final Cyrene, right? I think this is the final Cyrene that she meets. Yeah, because this is the formatting. So this would be like one of the final Sirens that she met before, yeah, before she got formatted, before she left as ma'am. Yeah, there should be. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this would be the. Yeah, yeah, this would be the 36th siren. Yeah, yeah, that would be the last siren that she meets because we appear there, right? Yeah, and I think well, this was like happening. I'm pretty sure that I made an analogy. I thought up that this is how, let's say, with the Euphoria storyline of how they diverging from, let's say, Cyrene being very much similar to Alicia. Because while they do have, let's say, similarities, the way this part of the story portrayed it was more like the relationship between Cyrene, what that Mem and Cyrene wasn't, let's say, like one to Alicia. Instead, it was more a portrayal of the relationship between Alicia and the HOC, of how HOC was an entity that absorbed information to develop itself, and once the entity met Alicia and was captivated by Alicia, HOC started to want to become like Alicia. That's why in Elysium Everlasting, she tried to replace Alicia, right? And that's how I thought like they at least not Elysium Everlasting, Amphorius, specifically 3.7, was trying to portray like an alternative let's say like development of what could have happened, right, between Elysia and HOC. Because it once again has to do with, let's say, character's destiny, right? And that the reason why HOC intention technically, went evil was because HOC in Elysium Everlasting, once they encountered Elysia, they accidentally also killed Elysia at the same time. And because, they killed Elysia, the rest of the Flame Chasers, which were around, wanted to essentially, find a reason of why did Elysia die, but also because the way HOC works is that it's made up of basically like different, like, different nodes, but it realized that all the other nodes were slowly getting killed, and that made it want to survive. That's why it accidentally killed Elysian too. Don't worry if whatever I just said went over your head and don't understand it, right? It's just, I guess, me trying to say of how I thought they were portraying Cyrenas as not being a, let's say, like a direct one to, let's say, Alicia in Impact Thirds, but more as if they were trying to take a different, like, show Cyrene, sorry, portray Alicia from like a different viewpoint or from a different angle. We will get an everlasting recap to hell no. I mean, I can do it. Like, I'm like confident I can do it, even though it's been a while since I've done that. But hell no. Maybe at some point in the future. Not now. Not today. Jesus Christ. That's how you know I'm brain throated, right? It's technically been 4 years, I think, since Elysium. No, not 4 years. Like 3 years, maybe, since Elysium Everlasting. But I can still, I can still very much go over it and have a good point. Like, when was 5.9? HO3 5.9 release date. 5.9 was 2022. Yeah, 3 years. Nice. So the only good no, 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 no. I disagree with that statement. I would say Elysium Everlasting is my favorite Impact Earth story, but I wouldn't say it's the only good one. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. If you say that you're an ignorant fuck, sorry, and you have bad taste. No, no, no. I would say that with a bias. Especially when you have stuff like the Flamescene story and the Hua story, right? And like the May story. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. I take offense to that. I take offense to that. That's just me showing my bias, by the way. Don't take it too serious. Okay. Anyway, back to 3.7. Jesus Christ. Okay, I can understand why we took so long with like let's say 3.6. Because I feel like because yesterday when I was like wondering like how did 3.6 take so long? Oh, yeah, I get it now. Um, so yeah, so yeah, there's like basically Mam Cyrene like basically understanding what she is, right, and of like oh yeah of how she originates, right, and then this is more of her showing us basically the origins of the demiurge, right? What did we learn? Essentially, what we learned is what exactly the demiurge is, right? And this is when when we met Mem, right? Yeah, this is when we met Mem, and we can see like Cyrene is showing us that of how everything happened, of why we met, of why we met Mem. Yeah, and the reason why Cyrene turned into Mem was because the stories that she heard from Cyrene while she was the seed of remembrance. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's like one way. The seed within memories, the ones that Cyrene held in her hands, and water with lament, right? With her experiences. Yeah, and then this is the reveal that, she is a demiurge, she's the heart of Amphorius, the first Norse spill. I know, this is like where I'm pretty sure this is like where it starts to talk about the stuff with HOC and Elysia, right? This is why I believe, like, okay, so I understand the relationship between Cyrene and them. Obviously, at the end of 3.7, it's a bit different, but we'll get there. We'll get there, chat. Don't worry. Yeah, we shall get there. Yeah, so this is essentially Cyrene telling us, about the truth about the demiurge, but also, at the same time, at the same time, Herta and Skrulum finding out, about the demiurge, about the truth of the demiurge, right? And I guess the thing to do with Fully and the Seed of Remembrance is that Fully's the one that put the Seed of Remembrance here, right? Because the child of Asnarava had to be one of the potential, well, yeah, one of the Fully's potentials is from this, right? But they would only know because fully technically occurs at the end of the time. But that's more important later on. More important later on. Don't worry too much. Don't worry too much now. But essentially, what matters, what actually matters right now at this point is that since we have the demiurge and they have the basically the self-actualization, it means that we have what the scepter originally, the original body of the scepter, right? Sorry, the original head of the scepter. So we have basically we have an opportunity to defeat Iron Tomb, right? Because the scepter would reject Iron Tomb and instead want to have Cyrene instead, right? Because Cyrene, the demiurge, is what the scepter was originally extrapolating. And then this is, her leaving leaving the cage. Yep. And then this is just, basically stating of how the demiurge is the only one that can really go up against Iron Tomb, and since we have the demiurge, we can go up against Iron Tomb. Alright. Okay. Yeah, so now we have one of the keys for we have the key to beat Iron Tomb essentially, right? So we have a chance to win, chat. We have a chance to not die essentially at this point. So it's not bleak. It is not bleak just yet. We have a opportunity. All right. And Xander's essentially going here that yes, I mean sure you may have Cyrene, but I mean it's not guaranteed, right? Tis not guaranteed. We triggered the Iron Nova without Iron Tomb. Yes. This has to do of why, let's say, Iron Tomb wasn't, let's say, released, right? This has to do with what Finan did. The last thing that Finan did. Which we'll get into a sec. Because if Finan didn't do what he did, then we would have lied. Then there's a good chance we may have lied, but he did something before the end. Right? But like essentially the future is still unknown, right? Because the future is still unknown because we're getting closer and closer to the fourth point of Noos's calculations of the vital point for the cosmos. And so now that we know all of this, right? We head to where Noos's embryo, sorry, not Noos's embryo, Iron Tomb's embryo is, right? So Iron Tomb is in this embryo, being developed. And to actually get rid of Iron Tomb is we're gonna have to basically prematurely, get him out, right? So we're gonna have to basically awaken Iron Tomb, right? If we actually want to deal with him. Isn't he decreasing because of Regis law? Well, yeah, he's technically decreasing, but it's not like a permanent solution, right? If anything, it's to stall, right? Because he's still being developed, and the thing that Hertha and Skrullen rewrote was basically to push it back a bit, but it's gonna, develop again, right? So essentially, what the Sarisha's law was, the point of Sarisha's law was to push it back a bit to give us time, but also to what Sarisha herself did was a mutual destruction in case the error never happened with, let's say, some as not as it had meant to be, right? But since now we found the demiurge, we have a way to fight against the Iron Tomb, right? We have a manner to fight against Iron Tomb. And now what Herta's gonna do is it's about her plan. It is about Herta's plan. Yeah, this is about Herta's plan. And I guess this is where I spoke about how Herta, plans to, use forcefully awaken Iron Tomb, so make Iron Tomb aim after News and use this opportunity for her to connect to News instead, right? And what Herta basically does here is she essentially tries to make a conference with all the geniuses, right? So, like with Stephen Lloyd, Ruan May, like all of the other geniuses of the Genius Society, right? And the reason why she does this is essentially to make sure that none of them try and, do something sneaky, right, while she's doing this, right? Because she's basically doing this so she doesn't get any interference from any of them. Right, because they will all notice because the moment Herta does this, all of the other geniuses will notice that she's doing something here, right? And so she holds this meeting just to ensure that, none of them actually interfere with what she's doing, right? And from all of the different, let's say, geniuses, like all of the possible geniuses that are alive that respond to this meeting, only 3 of them, or is it 3 or 4 of them that actually respond? Yeah, I think it's 3 of them respond. No, 4 of them respond. 4 geniuses respond to Herta's meeting. 1 being Ruan May, 2 being Professor Primitive, who is the one, behind Rapper's story quest, the one with the bananas and the monkeys. 4, Acha, which I don't think we know too much about Acha, right? Hold up. Acha. Yeah, we don't really know too much about Acha. Yeah. Out of all of the geniuses that show up here, Acha is the one we know the least of. Because she's a ghost in the quantum domain. That's all we technically end up learning and know about her, right? And the 5th, wait, 1, 2, Runway, Acha, Dr. Primitive, and the 4th being Polka. And I guess the significance of Polka, the Lord of Silence, is a very cool. She's the 4th. Yeah, she's the 4th genius. And she's the one that, one of the more, like, some people may know about her, right? Because she gets mentioned here and there. But she's the one that basically erased all pictures of herself, all information about herself, and goes around and kills other geniuses, right? She got mentioned in 3.5 when we learned about Lygus' true identity, and that Lygus was Xander was killed by Polka in the past, right? So so she essentially goes out around killing other geniuses. All right, and they are the only ones that respond to Herta, right? And Herta essentially tells them to, don't you fucking dare do anything when I'm doing this, right? And that's essentially what Herta does in this meeting. Yeah, we don't interfere with other researchers. And essentially telling them what she's going to do and for them to not do anything. And I guess this is where we find out what she specifically does, right? When she overclocked the scepter, complete self coronation in Iron Tomb's place, and she will, interact with Noose, which is what she does later on. Oh my god. Okay. Wait a minute, I just realized, Chad. It's been 2 hours. um, how has it been 2 hours, by the way? Huh. I swear it's only been like an hour. Interesting. Huh. No matter, let's continue. Okay. Game's too complicated. It, I would say slightly, but I didn't think that it's been this long. Well, I haven't realized that I've been speaking for this long, rather. But sure, because it does not feel like it's been 2 hours to me. Okay. So yeah, so it's just them telling them to fuck off, right? And to keep in their place. And yeah, so she furthers on that she wants to use her connection with News to basically influence of what the fourth instant is, right? Because they don't really know what the fourth instance is, and the fourth instance could be destruction, which is Iron Tomb's coronation, his birth, and bad for everyone. And since technically this is uncertain, she wants to connect to News and influence that fourth instance. All right. She's essentially telling them that don't interfere with what she's doing. And I guess the reason why Xander doesn't, let's say, why he's like, you know what, go ahead to Herta, right? He doesn't really, let's say, have too many uh, grievances with Herta here is because what Herta is doing, essentially interfering with a god, right, with Noose, and arguably going against Noose, right? And he's like, yeah, blasphemy, let's fuck Noose. Yeah. And I guess Xander basically tells them that if any of you fucks try to do anything, my other clones will work to, work against you, right? So essentially, even though Xander and Hertz are, let's say, technically, on different sides, right? Because Xander, wants Iron to live. He's technically not against what Hertz is trying to do, right? I mean, if you, um, yeah, because I guess this, like here, this curiosity thing is that that's come up like a few times. It's to do with, let's say, the nature of geniuses, right? Because like I said, that Xander isn't against what Herta wants to do because it's blasphemy, goes against what Noose would do, or I guess it's possible to go against Noose's calculations. But another reason is because all of the geniuses, the reason why they're geniuses is because of the curiosity, right? They want that curiosity to be uh, discovered and research, and they want to know what the result of that curiosity is, right? She did the Vita face. Oh, actually, she did. Yeah, that is the Vita face. Yeah. And so yeah, so they all kind of go like, sure, yeah, sure, fuck it, right? That's essentially what happens with them, right? Yeah, they essentially go, yeah, Yoda, right? And I guess this is where I guess Xander and Lycurgus are separate, right? Because Xander no longer, let's say, Xander, let's say, cuts his connection off from Lycurgus, right? Because Lycurgus originally was, someone who played a role in the Emphorius. He was originally the Aetheros, right? But it wasn't until, Xander, you know, took over and, started doing his stuff. And now since Xander no longer like has anything to do here, he's basically disconnected himself from Lycurgus, right? So now Lycurgus, the original Lycurgus, is the one who, you know, is just gonna observe now. And since everything's been decided, we are going to break into Iron Tomb, right? And we break Iron Tomb's defense. How are they doing this? Basically, Herta and Skrillin use their power to essentially break the seal on Iron Tomb, so that Iron Tomb is gonna be born in a bit. But for Iron Tomb to be fully born, and so they can actually fully emerge finally, we have to get through the prison which Finan made. So we have to get through the prison which Finan made inside Iron Tomb to slow down the development of Iron Tomb, right? And in here is where we kind of like meet the rest of the Chrysodes, right? Because they've all become Titans, right? Because since we completed the Era Nova, the Crisis Heirs have now become the Titans of their respective, core flame. And so Mayday is now no longer just Mayday, the Crisis Heir of Fury. He's now actually the Lance of Fury. How did he make this place? He used his Fury. He's Finan essentially just uses Fury to, make these different seals that are made of, let's say, different aspects of himself. So this is like his Fury, right? Hence the swords. And yeah, so all of the Titans. How did he trap Iron Tomb? So essentially, Iron Tomb is essentially the Black Tide, right? So he kind of like, how do I say this? I mean, you can assume that he used the loss of his will to basically push back the Iron Tomb, right? And these would be these in case would be the crises themselves. And now the crisis as we meet, so example, this Mayday, isn't like the Mayday from like the 36th cycle or the 37th cycle. This is a fully complete Mayday. So this is a Mayday which has the memories of all the 33 million different cycles. So similar to how Kastlana has all of the memories of, the previous iterations of himself in order to the cycles, this Mayday and the future Crisis that we meet are also complete versions, right? Yeah. Like, I'm the god of strife, Mayday, in this body rests 30 million lifetimes, of course, in fact. Yeah. The last of the 12 Titans, yeah. So there's a very complete, yeah, very essentially complete versions of themselves. And you see how this is where the Calamity Titans are, right? Because so this is the, you can, let's say, quote unquote, the Calamity Seal. So this is why Mayday, Cypher, and Castores are the ones we meet first, right? And the only way to, you know, awaken Ironton is by awakening Finan, and, breaking the seal. So that is essentially what we do here, right? We go down, we beat the enemies of it that are here, which are, the Black Tides. And we, undo the seal. Because we meet Finan here, sorry, we meet Mayday here, gives us his signets. Then we meet Cypher, who then also gives us her signet, right? Because I think, yeah, yeah, because this is the seal he built from the shattered remains of the 30 million lifetimes. Yeah, so basically using the different core flames to make the seals, and the only one being able to undo these seals would be us, the Trailblazer. Oh yeah. And so we have to keep going down to undo the seals. We need Cypher. We get Cypher's coin. And then we meet Castores, which, this is also fully complete Castores, right? And, basically Castores like has some words about Kastlana, the Flame Reaver Finan, right? And essentially of how do I say it? How do I say this? They would still trust. I guess this part is meant to show how, if let's say they had to keep going through the cycles and they were aware, they still have, let's say, they still trust Finan, right? They still believe in him, right? In his journey, right? It's basically show, their closeness, right? And their confidence and belief in Finan. Of how they like basically have like no malice against him, right? Because they believe and understand him. Yeah, so we have to keep going further down, chat, further down the seals to awaken Finan, because that bum ass is sleeping during this whole time. And yeah. And here, but we see the other Crisis, right? We see Hyacinth, who's using her power to mend Finan's, like, kind of like mend him, right, to keep him, not to keep him stable, let's say, but to how do I say it? I guess kind not to, not, okay, I guess not to mention, right, but in a way to like let's say keep him company, right, so he doesn't fall into despair, right? If that makes sense. Yeah, so after this, oh, and I guess while we've been doing this, you get to see, I guess, let's say, notices or I guess words from the other Lord Ravagers, right? Because I believe in the first zone, you see a note from Zephyros about, you know, the birth of Iron Tomb. Here's where you see one from Fantilia. I guess what matters isn't really, let's say, more so the letters themselves. I guess it gives us a view into what the Ravagers think about what's happening here, right? It technically what the letters don't really matter, right? They don't really. How do I say it without confuse making this misunderstood? Um, the fact that this letters doesn't matter. It's just kind of like meant to give us an understanding of what the Ravagers think about, you know, Iron Tomb and his birth, right? Because most of them just, I feel like most of them don't really care, right? They're just saying, oh, okay, this is happening, right? They're not really too chuffed about it. Yeah, and then I guess we see Anaxa, and you know, him like then realizing, oh, the demiurge was Cyrene, right? Mem, right? And of how Anaxa, I guess, has been trying to, let's say, how Anaxa has also been trying to awaken Finan, sorry. Words are like getting out of my head. But he hasn't been able to awaken Finan, right? So the only reason he hasn't been able to awaken Finan is because we are the only ones that can awake Finan, right? The other deliverer. Chad, give me like a minute so I can use the toilet quickly. Be back, chat. Oh my lord, Jesus Christ! I feel like I may lose my voice from doing all this talking. Maybe, maybe. Uh, Jesus Christ, there is like a lot that we have to go through, don't we? Well, no, technically, I don't really feel like there's too much left that we have to go through, right? But yeah. I mean, I guess what really matters to me is that I hope that you're still finding it. Let's say, I want to say interesting slash informative. Although technically, I'm just basically going over a story that most of you should have, like, let's say, just completed, right? So they should be more or less fresh in your minds. If anything, the most things that I can add is just the interpretations and links to Impact Third, right? Because like out of every let's say 20 HSR players, one of them probably has played Impact Third, right? And even from there, the chance of them understanding, let's say, Elysium Realm well is, I don't know if it's that high. Because I do know that, I do remember that some people didn't like Elysium Realm, Elysium Everlasting. Because I remember one of the criticisms of like some people not liking it was that they felt that they introduced 12 characters like out of nowhere. And then I remember when I was reading that, when I like when when this was like fresh, I remember thinking that, are these people stupid? Like most of the characters from Elysium Everlasting weren't like even new, right? Because we knew of Sakura, we knew of Paul, we knew of Kevin, we knew of Sue. Like none of them were, let's say, quote unquote new, right? Like yeah, there was like some new characters, right? But some of them were introduced in none of the mangas, right? But if you did Elysium Realm and did all of these stories there and all of the Remembrance Vessels, you got a pretty good understanding of what these characters were, right? Because I do believe that the Elysium Realm, the playable mode, no, right, and the chapters 1, 2, and 3, and the Remembrance Vessels, if you do all of those, you have a very good understanding of what each flame chaser is like, right? So, but I know, like, I don't think like a lot of people who, let's say, played Elysium Everlasting, like, fully did the whole of the Elysium Realm. Which I can somewhat get, right? Because when Elysium Realm was originally completed, you had to kind of like, let's say, do a lot of things to progress with the Elysium Realm story, which was annoying, but I must have didn't mind it, right? Because I was just did the story without, let's say, not fully focusing on it, but without being my pure intention, right? Because when Elysium Realm was first released, I was just like fucking messing around with different builds in that mode because that mode was unfair, was unbalanced as hell, and yeah. But regardless. Okay, let's continue. So yeah, so we just go around, basically releasing the seals on Fine and right to get him to awaken him, right? So yeah, by awakening him, right, by basically him fulfilling his, making him realize of his wish, but also making him like relieving him from his suffering, right? Too. How does this help him release? Basically, we're slowly waking him up because he's essentially kind of like segmented himself to into different pieces, right? And we're slowly, essentially, putting him back together. If that makes sense. Oh, and then I guess we see Serija and Hysolins here, right? Because they're also uh, Titans in this case, but they can't, let's say, really interfere with too much here, right? Because Vinan never really, let's say, interacted with him, right? Interacted with either of them. Because in most of these journeys, he probably just killed them and went straight forward, right? Because technically, I think maybe just once or twice he probably interacted with Hysolins and Serija out of all of his 33 million different journeys, right? Which makes sense. So they can't really do anything, right? But for them to get to the final section, they'll just have to, let's say, find another route, which they managed to do, right? Yeah. So they're just finding another route to the battlefields. And I think this is where we see assets verbs, right? Yeah, assets notes. Yeah, it's just basically us getting, let's say, like a view into the uh into the Lord Ravager's personalities, right? That's why I say like it's not too important, right? The notes. It's like interesting bits of letters, lore, right? Because it helps you understand them a bit, but to the story itself now, it doesn't matter too much, this stuff. And I think this is where like Vicken went back to find the notes. Yeah, it is. Yeah, because that's where I found Zephyros's notes. Yeah. About some of them are awaiting Iron Tomb's arrival, some of them don't really care, right? Because if I recall, Fantilia didn't really care, and Assad was like, it might be like amusing, right? Zephyros like is awaiting for Iron Tomb's arrival, right? It's like, it's just like they have varying opinions about this. And so we meet Chibi, right? We meet Chian, Chibi. No, we meet Chian and Chinon. Sorry, we don't meet Chibi's not here. And I guess what we see is that what was here again? Let me try to remember. I guess here's where we kind of like see what exactly happened to Finan, right? Because this is the log of what happened to Finan on the 36 cycle, right? Where you can see that Finan, I briefly encountered the nuke, and that he encountered the nuke in the destruction path space, where Finan was killed, beaten. And this is specifically what what Caslano did, right? Where he wasn't, well, he was being absorbed by Iron Tomb. He used the basically destruction to destroy his own data, and by doing so, he ended up making the barrier. The sea was on Finan. Sorry, not Finan, on Iron Tomb. Sorry. Oh my god. And in the 37th cycle, so the one before the one we're on, Finan was basically fighting back against the Black Sides. Essentially, kind of showing of how much of a generational hater Finan is towards the destruction. Well, yeah. So Finan was always fighting, essentially. This is essentially what it's showing, right? That Finan was always fighting, even after everything, right? And we can see of how Ligers was Xander was trying to, let's say, I guess influence Finan, right? The child Finan, to let go of his anger, right? So like he lets go of his anger, which results in the further development of the Black Tide and Iron Tomb, right? Oh, yeah, and this is Celes Nova, right? She's kind of like, yeah, this is what will happen if Iron Tomb is born, right? So she's like, kind of like, yay, let's go, come Iron Tomb. Oh my god. And then this is to fully release the seal, and this is what we get rid of it. We try and bring Vidence's wish and Vidence's despair into one whole, right? Because that's essentially what makes up Finan, right? Because the reason why Finan managed to do what he did was because of his wish, right? His wish to uphold everyone's wishes, right? But because of this, he also had his despair, and his despair against not being able to, fight against Iron in the nuke, right? The destruction. But both of these, you know, make Finan, right? So this is like bringing him whole. And then the blank statue being Kid Finan, right? About the innocent Finan who, I guess, whose wish was to fulfill everyone's wishes. Yeah. And I think this Ligas is just kind of like, I guess Ligas is kind of like, let's say, just not, let's say, doing anything too bad here, right? But it's just using this opportunity to, I guess, talk to N blank Finan, if that makes sense. Mm. Yeah. And I guess here's where we kind of see like Lycus's thoughts and opinions on what he thinks of Finan, right? Of how he kind of like sees Finan as a masterpiece, right? Because obviously his first masterpiece is News, right? But I mean, he kind of like hates News because he wasn't able to control News, and then his second masterpiece would essentially technically be Finan, right, rather than Nine Two, right? Yeah, and that and that the lie was essentially born from Xander's paranoia, right, over News, which is why it drove him to want destruction, or the destruction of News. Yeah, so we finally see Aglaya and Chibi. We finally see Aglaya and Chibi, who essentially are the ones who console the small Finan, right? The innocent Finan, the blank Finan, and essentially, basically, wants him to reach self realization, right? And this will finally awaken Finan, right? Yeah, with this, we've reunited with all of the other Titans, well, with all of the other Flame Chasers, and yeah, Finan will finally awaken, and we'll have to break the last seal, which will then allow us access to Iron Tomb. So we are like literally moments away from the finale. I say that, but then if you look at this, then if you look at this chat, we're 5 hours and 37 minutes into an 8 hour and 54 minutes in. So this is a really long finale. It's a really long finale. Um, can we even fight him? Well, with the power of love and friendship and the demiurge, maybe, maybe. Because we should probably have enough, right? Was this a good plan after all? Well, I don't really think that there was too many, let's say, things I could have done. Our hands were kind of limited. So, yeah, we go and finally finish the journey and fully awaken. Well, technically fully awaken Kaslana, right? Because finally is Kaslana. And then with all of these signals of every flame chase, of every crisis, well, of every Titan now, because they're all Titans, we arrive at the final entrance point, at the final point, at the battlefield, just before where Iron to miss. And now that we're gonna awaken Iron Tomb, everyone is prepared to fight back against him, right? That while we are the vanguards, we are not alone, right? And that we are getting to the point in time since Noose is now fully looking at him into Emporius. Noose is fully looking into Emporius for the fourth instance. And yeah. So I guess we get more of an understanding about Kavili, right? Of how the words which the words which, let's say, describe the nameless, which are explore, understand, establish, and connect, which is what the meaning of to trailblaze is. And then the fifth word, salvation, to bring salvation to a planet, right? And which is what we're doing here. And we're seeing all of the Titans, right? And Hyson and Serija still managed to get in here. And the reason they managed to get here is because it was Lygus was the one that, basically got them here. And so we are going to the embodiment of destruction to Finan and Iron Tomb. And so we're seeing basically Finan, of how he was attacking the scepter each time in each of his cycles, of how he tried to fight back against the destruction, of how he tried to fight back against Iron Tomb and the scepter. And now we finally catch up. We have finally caught up to Finan and we finally caught up to Finan and Kaslana. And what we need to do is just, move forward and plunge a resistance against Iron Tomb. Because that's the only way we can essentially move forward and, basically become heroes. All right. And so now to break this seal, we have to beat Finan, right? And I guess what the interesting part about this fight is that Finan never, let's say, fights back against you, right? He just stands there and basically asks you questions. And, we're just, because you're not even here, right? Because it's to show that we are the Titan, right? Because we have, when we speak, it goes the throne of worlds, right? So we're ready. We're ready for this fight. So we are gonna go down and get dirty with Finan. Wait, sorry, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, we're gonna finally get to the points. And yeah, so we just have to fight fine and well, not fight fine because it's not like he ever fights back against us, right? And yeah, so we are like getting there. Why the hell did I have Chewie in this team? Why is Chewie here instead of Sunday? The hell is wrong with me? Okay, maybe that's why I lost. Okay, maybe. But yeah, so like as soon as like the more damage you do to Finan at 3 different points, he asks you a question, right? And essentially, you get an option of choices here, chat. And there is a correct choice here, and there's a wrong choice here. And the correct choice is, to give a basically like a fighting spirit type of answer, right? So that we will like stand for it, right? That we will stand for Boreas. And then there's the wrong choices where perhaps there's still another way, right? And yeah, if you choose the wrong choice, chat, it makes the fight harder. If you choose the right choice, it makes the fight easier. And I kinda each time made the fight harder, which was yeah, that was a kind of my bad. Because yeah, I think I chose I'm not ready to think about this right. Yeah. uh yeah. I pressed it too. Yeah, I kind of like because the choices you make here affect this fight, but specifically they affect the next fights, which is where I kind of yeah, I kind of fucked up. But now that we've broken the seal, Iron Tomb he is coming out of the womb, literally. You can see him literally open up, and he has awoken. He's awoken now. He's awaked. He's no longer sleeping, and he's gonna kill everyone. Yay. Hmm. Chad, maybe this might not have been a good idea to awaken Finan here. I mean, not awaken Finan, to awaken Iron Tomb here. Maybe we should have waited a bit. Maybe. And so now we fight Iron Tomb. And he has like a really good theme, right? And I guess it kind of like shows the scale of like Iron Tomb's actual size, by the way, because like there's like a lot of, let's say, ships. Like this, we see like a lot of ships. We see like a fair number of mechs here, right? That are literally attacking Iron Tomb. But then when you see it, those ships are massive. But then when you see it in comparison to the size of Iron Tomb, they're not really that big. It kind of shows you the scale of Iron Tomb that he really is just a fucking giant, a cosmic giant, right? Just like Jesus Christ. But I will say this. It is like the item fight itself is actually not bad. It's fine. I don't really, let's say, like this design, right? Obviously, I mean, like this design is technically meant to be like a representative of how Iron Tomb became after he absorbed Kaslana, right? But I wouldn't really say it's like the best design because maybe they could have made it so we fought the big one, right? Because we've so far we've seen Iron Tomb as how he is in the back here, but instead what we fight is this, which is like I kind of wish like maybe like it transformed like as soon as like the further you get into the fight, but it really doesn't, right? It gets like new skills or new like let's say attacks, but it doesn't like let's say change shape, right, to adapt to the fight. Which I feel like it would have been cool, right? Because then it would have been like how a virus works, right? Because a virus adapts to what it's like trying to invade, right? Or trying to trying to corrupt. And it would have been cool if Iron Tomb like this did that, but it doesn't. So it's kind of like I feel like it was a missed opportunity, right? But the fight itself is cool. Like the music is really nice. Like the whole fight itself is fine. And yeah, so we have to fight Iron Tomb and push back the hatred because if the hatred fills up, everyone is dead. Chat. Everyone is dead. Yeah, so it's just a fight. Wait, hold up. Do I see the debuffs against me? No, I don't. You don't see them. Oh, yeah. So you fight him. I fought him with my Glaya because my Glaya. I don't. Why did I have Chibi here? What is wrong with me? Oh my god! I injured myself in this fight. But yeah, so we fight him phase 1 and phase 2. It's actually kind of like a slightly long fight, right? So fighting against it, right? But then as we beating him, uh that was phase 1. The two phases were phase 1, right? And now Iron Tomb actually gets quote unquote serious, right? And yeah, he is about to kill us all. He is gonna kill us all here. Which he does. And we die. The end, chat. We've all died. There's nothing more to hear. There's nothing more to the story. So yeah. That is 3.8, 3.7 done, chat. So kind of a bit of an anticlimactic ending, right? Everyone died. Not much we could do. Yeah. So I guess that'll be it for today, chat. So I'll see you guys next time once we do 3.7, 3.8. Okay. We will kill him tomorrow. Yeah. Okay, so we can't really just the game can't continue if Lygus dies. I mean, if we all die, right? Because we need to be alive for the story to continue. But essentially, we can see how much of a threat Iron Tomb actually is, right? Because you can see the scale, his scale, right? It's like, yeah, just destruction everywhere. Yeah. And this is what's to happen. And this is what's to happen. Is it here? Is it here? And this is, I guess, we see what I guess the conclusion of Herta's plan, right? Because with Item born now, Herta's now has an access point to News. And so Herta manages to connect to News. Because you can see Item is deleting everything. Like you see deleting entity, deleting like everything. But Herta managed to connect to Item. Sorry, to News. So I guess we essentially are kind of talking to News right now with her acting as translator because News is apparently looking at us. Like News has cast a gaze on us. So it's like a bit of privacy, right? And I guess okay, there's like a few things, right? Because apparently when you look at this thing properly, some of the text here like changes to not true or false, right? Because there's like a few things that are actually like shown here, right? That you have to look for. I can't see it here, but supposedly like in reverse, like this actually says not true or not real, right? Because you can see the NOT, right? Not REAL, yeah, not real. Right, which essentially is kind of like meant to imply that what happened didn't actually just happen yet, right? It was about to happen. But like news specifically asks us why do we trailblaze, right? Yeah, he asks us why do we trailblaze, and then we get different responses, and apparently, depending on your responses here, it changes like some stuff after. I'm not really sure what is meant to change, but apparently, if you pick some of these choices, you don't get a scene that we saw later. Specific about when we get to that scene, I'll mention it, right? But yeah, so yeah, we essentially get asked questions by news about why he keeps basically ends up asking us why do we trailblaze, right? And I think I answer him, yeah, and he specifically calls us Akivili. So you from this we can make the assumption that maybe that we are Akivili, right? Or rather specifically, the us from before, right? Because we know that we used to travel with the Celeron hunters, right? But we have like no memory of that lifetime. And it's possible what news is implying is that the one who traveled with the Astral Express was Akivili. That is what it could imply, right? Or what I think it's implying here, rather than us itself being Akivili itself. Like we're essentially what I'm essentially trying to say is like we're a reincarnation of Akivili, right? Why is he asking us that? Well, that is the thing. He's essentially trying to find our intentions, right? Of why do you trailblaze? Like, why do we go forwards? Why do we go forwards? Essentially, right? And apparently, we gave enough responses that we managed to change the fourth instance. Meaning, we managed to prevent Iron Tomb from killing us all, right? Because we shifted the fourth instance from destruction to not destruction. Yeah. And now we open the book, and although actually no, it did happen, right? Because everyone technically did get killed. Sorry, but via I guess remembrance, if I understand this correctly, um, we're able basically to go back to the point before then, right? To point before the point before uh Ironson killed everyone, right? With the power of Fully, right? Because Fully is now also casting the gaze on Amphorius. So yeah, but Cyrene is, I guess, but to make sure that we're able to do it, right? Cyrene has to hold everyone's memory, right? So everyone who would have died, Cyrene has to hold the memory. Give me a sec, chat. Give me like 2 minutes. Be back. Okay, back shots, right? Okay. Okay, so let's see. Where were we? Where were we? So yeah, so I was saying that. Where are we? We're in the Path of Remembrance. The Path of Remembrance. You know the space Path of Remembrance. You know how Biden Biden fought Zephyros and Nuke in this area, but that was the space for destruction. This one is the space for remembrance. That's why we are here and with what's the name? Cyrene. Let me just put this. Right, and what we're doing here is essentially what um um yeah, well, the cosmos will witness a non-forces answer after this fleeting moment, right? But to do that, Cyrene is basically holding the memories of everyone who would have died, so all of the victims of Iron Tomb. But because she does this and she has to hold all the memories, it's basically that she has so many memories that she starts to kind of, let's say, like lose herself, right? She starts to not lose herself, but she starts to no, I guess lose herself wouldn't be the worst analogy here, right? But then we get kind of like this message from Pom Pom, right? Because this is in space time, like out of space time, and we get this message from Pom Pom, but kind of like essentially a reminder, right? That to just run, right? To keep going forward, right? To not to stop and just keep going forward to where we want to go, right? So you could say like it's a word of comfort, like kind of like a word of comfort from Pom Pom. But one interesting thing that I guess Pom Pom does mention is that they were also once in a position like this, and by they is most likely referring to Akivili, right? That we are basically kind of like going on a path similar to what Akivili went through, right? So yeah, we catch up to the seat of memory, and we reach this place, right, where a place frozen in time, where formed of memory of Cyrene's memory. And here is I guess where Cyrene is like holding everyone's memory, right? All of the essentially all of the universe's memory with her, right? And essentially to bring our Cyrene back, we essentially are taking on some of her burden, right? We are absorbing some of the memory that she's absorbing, that she observes, right? Because we essentially need Cyrene to not come whole again, but to, let's say, quote unquote reawaken, right? And essentially we get like some more, I guess essentially we get what Kafka would have told us, right? That on the trip to Amphorius, we encounter a pure child of Adnas Rava, so Cyrene, and teach her what love is, right? And then we will face destruction for the first time. And this being, Iron Tomb, right? Even though we faced Fantilia before, right? What we faced was only a portion of Fantilia. We didn't really face Fantilia herself, right? This time we're actually directly facing Iron Tomb. Right? Yeah. So essentially we kind of get like what Cyrene would be, right? Or what would happen to Cyrene, but regardless of what it is, we manage to basically carry enough of the burden so that Cyrene kind of like recomposes herself, if that makes sense. And then we're told that Cyrene was then encountered fully, right? That she got this message from Pulley that you, I, were one progeny dated cast fallen to the mortal realm, right? It's basically a message that she got from Cyrene that's supposedly is meant to be like a very cryptic message. Although we don't really understand this until a bit of over here, chat. But yeah, so it's just more about how we will basically embark on this journey and then resist the destruction. All right. So we go through the cradle of we go through this, right? The cradle of Amphorius, right? And we basically remember back to the point where have to go back to the point before everything got killed. Everyone got killed. That's essentially the this past which happened here, right? And this is what we're meant to think that this is the, let's say, original Cyrene, right? The Cyrene that's the first Cyrene, the Cyrene that nurtured Mem, right? That is what we're, let's say, meant to believe this whole time, which then makes sense, right? From everything we've been told, right? We've been told that they're different beings, they're the separate entities. Until a bit later on, right? And I guess you know how I said like a few moments ago of how the Noose's talk essentially implies that our past self, the one that traveled with the Stellar Hunters, was Akavili, and that is because of this. Because we Kalas somewhat kind of shows up, right, and starts asking us, why do you trailblaze, right? Which is very much the similar question of why of that Noose asked, right? And Kalas essentially gives us that response that of why he trailblazed, right? Because my eyes have not seen the end of this. Is supposedly we can assume that this is why Akavili trailblazed. That Akavili trailblazed because the eyes have not seen the end, but we show that we have a different answer, right? Because we trailblazed because we are already on the road, rather because we haven't seen the end. So I feel like this is something that will maybe, like, let's say, be more significant later on, right? Oh, now I had Sunday in this fight, and then I lost this fight because the fight was harder for me. Yeah, we just yeah, I just made this fight. I'm pretty sure I made this fight harder than me for myself than I should have. What are they doing? We essentially went back to the point um before Iron Tomb killed us, right? And you know we're gonna fight back and win. Not with the Goliath team, but with Castor's team. With the Castor's team, we fight back and manage to beat Iron Tomb. What did we change now? What changed now from that point? I mean, what you could argue is that what changed from then and now is that Cyrene as a demiurge is now, let's say, quote unquote, fully awakened after the message she got from Fully, right? But also we added a new variable with Herta's assistance, right? Uh when she communicated with Noose. Because before then, everything led towards destruction. But when Herta interacted with Noose and then Noose, interacted with us, that interaction created a new variable which allowed this opportunity to occur. And so, we fight back and we, after getting rid of 9,999 shields, or sorry, 100,000 shields, HP bars, we load the crisis airs. Everyone loads themselves into the chamber and fire and kill Iron Tomb. And by doing this, we essentially spread the memorial of Amphorius to the whole cosmos. What did Herta achieve? Herta managed to actually communicate with Nous, because before this point, a lot of people have tried to communicate with Nous, right? Because Nous has always, let's say, tried to calculate the future, but Nous never responded to anyone, right? When they asked Nous a question. But this time, Herta actually managed to get Nous, right? Nous's attention, and Nous then focused the attention to us. Did you change anything with those questions? Yes, because like I said a bit ago, before the fourth instant, which Nous was calculating, so from what we can see, always led to the destruction, right? To the birth of Iron Tomb. But with the questions, we created a variable with our answers, and it created the possibility of a different future, which is what we're doing now, which is what happened now. And then I guess this is where, Lygus and Screwdom basically talk, right? And they basically go on that, I guess Screwdom keeps wanting to find out from Lygus that was it worth it, right? Was everything that he did worth it, right? And I guess the most important thing about this point is that there's a theory that, you know how Lygus, no, not Lygus, Xander basically made like clones of himself. I think 9 different clones of himself before he died, and Lygus being one of them. There's a theory that the one of the other clones is actually Screwlum, right? And I guess what kind of like supports that is that in some sections, Lygus sometimes refers to Screwlum as his brother, but what let's say actually more supports that is what Lygus says here, right? Because Lygus tells us that a story about Xander, right? That in the past, Xander wanted to, test an experiment on his teacher by, poisoning him, but the experiment never happened because Xander's consciousness got to him, right? So he never did it, right? But Xander's logic wanted him to do it, but his consciousness prevented him. And Lygus says that he is a result of Xander's logic, right? So his cold-hearted calculativeness, right? But what he does say is that he calls because he's basically here, right? Because he says that in the future he may, end up having to destroy Nous himself. Skrilla may end up having to destroy Nous himself. But what specifically Lygus says is he will do it because of his consciousness, which can then kind of like, let's say that Screwlum is one of Xander's one of Xander's clones, right? But now we're back in our room, right? And everything's good. And we've won. And this whole section is we've won. We managed to fight back against Iron Tomb. And yeah, we've completed the journey. All is good now. But the space where we are now, it's we're essentially kind of like in a memory bubble, right? Which holds the memory of the crisis as of like the Titans. Because even though we managed to beat Iron Tomb, it was at the cost of the destruction of the Scepter, which in turn means the destruction of Amphorius. But a result of all of that was the creation of an actual seed for a real Amphorius. So the area where Amphorius used to be is now actually slowly developing into an actual real Amphorius. But the Amphorius we were in before, this Scepter, the simulation, was destroyed. Meaning that at some point in the future, Amphorius will actually be developed, right? But until then, the story, everything has to exist in as I've written, right? And this is where we've got, I guess, a final farewell with everyone, right? Because the story has been completed, right? We've completed the journey, the hero's journey. And yeah, in the end, we have to say goodbye to everyone, right? We say goodbye to everyone. But yeah, so it's kind of like a bittersweet ending. Like, there is a future of Amphorius, essentially, right? But then we find out that Cyrene made a decision after, you know, Amphorius was, Iron Tomb was beaten. And that is that she spoke with Herta after Iron Tomb was beaten, and Herta informed Cyrene of an important thing that Herta found out when she was inside Noose's head. And that is that Herta foresaw two things for Cyrene. That Cyrene essentially has two options, right? That she can leave Amphorius, basically disconnecting herself from Amphorius, right? And she'll be able to travel with us with the Astral Express, go on journey with us. However, because the causality of what happened in Amphorius, essentially the cosmos will try to rectify that causality, which can then lead in the future leads to the rise of Iron Tomb again and the death of the cosmos. The other option to rectify this causality and make it so that this event is set in stone, our victory over Iron Tomb is set in stone, Cyrene can exist. Basically, you go back to the start of the story and close this loop. But in doing so, Cyrene will essentially end up living in a loop herself, in her own loop, where she will continuously experience the Flame Chase journey while everyone continues to live in the future. So essentially, she will live in the past and everyone else will live in the present, the future. So essentially, she would basically never be able to travel with us, right? And Cyrene essentially, decides to go with the second option, right? To go with the second option. But here's also where I guess Herta explains to us what she found out about the truth of Fully. Because she finds out that Fully, the Aeon of Remembrance, the one that everyone sees, is nothing but a husk. That is not the actual real Aeon. That instead, she realizes that Fully cannot really exist. Because Fully is meant to record the memory of the universe, but that can only happen at the end of the universe, right? So Fully can only exist at the end of time, and that the children of Anas Rava, that Cyrene is one of, and that the other that we know March is also one of, are actually the ones who have the capability of becoming Fully in the future. But with everything that's happening in Amphorius, it's very much implied that, Cyrene is the one that will end up becoming Fully at the end of time, right? But yeah, so we learned, so essentially we kind of learned that it's possible that the Harlem Forest story is arguably the origin of Fully, right? And with all of this information, Cyrene decides to, basically live in the past, right? So that the future can exist. And so that's what Cyrene does, right? And so now, essentially, Cyrene basically retraces the whole journey, right? With who, sh- with the Cyrene, with the first Cyrene. I know I'm saying a lot of Cyrenes, right? But I think you all understand what I mean. Yeah, well, we all die in the first option, right? So that's not really an option. And yeah, so essentially, Cyrene goes through the whole journey, like retraces, essentially, kind of retraces her steps, right? And during this whole time, she ends up slowly starting to basically regain all her memory, right? And I guess in this bits and pieces, we get more references to Impact Third, right? Because the 093, like symbolizing ego, like because Cyrene is not just, let's say, like a mementic entity, that she is like an actual being, right? She's an actual human, right? Similar to how something which Alicia questioned, right? After she realized that she was a natural born Harsha. I mean, you can say that this is essentially Cyrene's domain, right? Yeah, and so Cyrene is basically going back in time and going back to the start, right? To fix the casual loop, to ensure that, the future is the future. And yeah, so she goes back to Ades Elysiae, back to the start of the journey, right? And Cyrene essentially falls asleep and trying to, you know, keep everyone's memory, basically remember everyone's memory, right? And this is like what I was saying, that it's very much implicated that Cyrene is the one that ends up becoming fully in the future, right? With, this imagery. And then when Cyrene wakes up, like the other Cyrene is gone, but Cyrene comes into realization that Cyrene, Mem, and the Seed of Remembrance are all just one being. That they're all the same being, just from different points, right? But they're all basically the one and the same. That there were never like any like different versions. They're all Cyrene, right? And since we have to go back to the start of the story, um, Cyrene essentially has to start losing her memory, right? She starts to lose her memory because that will close off the loop and the causality issue. And as she falls asleep, I guess she starts to. The one of the last things she can remember is her actual name, because the name Cyrene was originally just a pain name she gave herself after she started writing stories. And her real name is Ely, but she doesn't finish it off right. But um, you can probably assume it's Alicia, right, or an anagram of Alicia, all right? Yeah, it's a yeah, yeah. That's essentially the story, right, of how Cyrene, whose story went to the future, all right, from the how the seed of remembrance developed into Cyrene to Big Cyrene, and that's like the start. And now the ending is where she has to go to the past, right? Where Big Cyrene goes into Small Cyrene to Mem to the Key of Remembrance to start the loop. And then we get the animated short, right? And essentially, we then loop all the way back to the start of the story, right? And Mem awakens, And yeah, it goes to this beginning of the story where we entered Amphorius and Mem first saw us, right? And that is the Amphorius story. And there's like small extra parts, right, with with how Buto is the one who saved us in the end, right? After you know, Iron Sea was blown away. And there's like more focuses on like basically reminding you about the Buto storyline with Oswaldo Schneider, and also that the elation are gonna be very important at real soon, right? What happens when that story ends? What when the story that Cyrene went back to? Uh, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I mean, you could probably think of it like a different timeline, but it's essentially the same timeline, right? It's just that she went back to the start of it. There will be an error over there. It's just that she basically went back in time. It's essentially the same timeline, but she just went back in time to the start of it to ensure that the future that we obtained is an actual future, is real. So yeah, so that is where Amphorius ends, and I guess there's the epilogue, right, where we go to the region where to Cyrene's domain, where we see everyone from like the crisis are there with some of the family, and we essentially realize that to ensure that Amphorius develops the way it should, with the memorial of the Amphorius we knew, we have to spread the story of Amphorius, and so we essentially author as I've written, right, and we essentially spread the word of as I've written, right, the story of Amphorius to the whole of the cosmos, so that everyone remembers Amphorius, to kind of ensure that Amphorius becomes Amphorius we knew. So yeah, so she's not a part of Amphorius. She is a part of the Amphorius. She is a part of the original Amphorius, and I guess technically, in essence, uh, she is also technically a part of the new Amphorius, as long as we remember Cyrene. But yeah, that is the end of 3.7 chat. 3.7 is pretty good. I would say that some parts can be seen as like they, let's say, like drag on a bit, but that's because they literally had to put the whole of Cyrene section at the end. I still liked it. Um, yeah, I still pretty enjoyed it. I mean, I feel like I enjoyed Amphorius way more than, let's say, Penacony. Not like Penacony was bad, but I feel like Amphorius was like a step up, right? You know how earlier I said that I was watching Giga play basically do 3.7. Jesus Christ, the aneurysm I was having like when I was reading his chats. It was like, oh my god, it was actually irritating with the stupid opinions some people had, but oh, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Did he understand everything? Oh no, he got the general gist of the story, right? It's like he got the general gist of the story that anyone would understand, right? Obviously, certain references to like Impact that would go over his head, which is like understandable, right? Because he hasn't played Impact that, but it was still like fine. It's just that his chat was somewhat irritating, to be honest. Although I do disagree with his opinion that 3.5 was filler. I understand why people some may understand it, right? Because I mean, like I said, right, 3.5 does feel weak because it's between 3.4 and 6, but 3.5 is still like really important, right? But yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Yeah, I'm just curious how they'll handle 4.x because would say that I do agree with Murder of Birds because yeah, I'm not sure what type of story they'll try and tell with 4.0, with 4.x. But I guess we'll see, right? We will see. You're the only one who got it. No, 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 no. Like, I'm like sure like a lot of other people also got it. But yeah. So we are done with the Euphorious talk. Oh my god. Oh my god, we are done finally. It only took 7 days, a whole week. Oh my god. I can finally start the Impact Third Chapter 10 tomorrow. Oh my lord. Actually, no. Tomorrow there is a chance there's no stream chat because I may have to do some stuff in the evening. So if there's like no stream tomorrow, yeah, there'll be no stream tomorrow, and so we'll do it on Tuesday. And if there is a stream tomorrow, it might be late, a somewhat late stream, but like, oh, we'll see, right? So I'll probably post something, right, or make like a notice on the chat, like around the usual time if there's a stream or not. But yeah, so that'll be so that'll be it for today then, chat. I might no that'll be it for today. Because Jesus Christ. I do need to cut out. I mean I did say like around 8:30 is like my limit for today. But yeah, so because of my misscheduling, which is my bad. But yeah. So that'll be it for today. So that means it's still pretty interesting. Still pretty good. I think I may add some things next time. Maybe. We'll see. But yeah, so that'll be it for today, Gen Chat. So hopefully you guys enjoyed yourselves. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of your Sunday. Or